I call the meeting of the San Juan Unified School District Board of Education to order. The closed session item on tonight's agenda is one, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, Subdivision D, Paragraph 1, in two cases, Magali Kincaid, Benito Juarez Neighborhood Association, Neighborhood Elections Now, Juan Carolina Flores, Damaris Canton versus San Juan Unified School District, complaint for violation of the California Voting Rights Act, and in the alternative for violation of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the California Constitution. Sacramento Superior Court case number 34, 2020-0028-6475. And Carolina Flores, Neighborhood Elections Now, petitioners versus San Juan Unified School District, Paula Viescas in her official capacity of board president, respondents verified petition for writ of mandate pursuant to the First Amendment and the California Constitution, California Public Records Act, and the Ralph M. Brown Act, and complaint for declaratory and injunctive relief, Sacramento Superior Court number 34, 2021-8000-3644, CU, WM, GDS. We do not have any speaker cards on this closed session agenda items, and I am confirming that we do not have any written comments submitted on the closed session agenda items. So we will now move into closed session, and we will return to open session at 6:30. I call the meeting of the San Juan Unified School District Board of Education back to order. Board meetings are being held in person in the boardroom at the district office, and the public is welcome to attend. Alternatively, the meeting may also be viewed on the district's YouTube channel, where it is being live streamed. The meeting is being audio and video recorded, and the recording may capture sounds and images of those attending this meeting. The recording will be posted on the district website. At this moment, I invite you to please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Good evening and welcome. I'm Paula Viescas, Board President, and to my right is Ms. Zima Creason, Board Clerk. To her right is Ms. Pam Costa and Mr. Saul Hernandez, Board members. Board Vice President Michael McKibben is joining us by telephone tonight. Dr. McKibben, I want to confirm that you can hear us at this time.
I can hear you just fine, thank you.
Excellent, and thank you for joining us. To my left is Superintendent Kern, and to his left is Board Administrative Assistant Stephanie Cunningham. Before we begin, I'd like to remind the public that tonight is a special meeting of the Board of Education, and public comment is only accepted regarding items that are listed on tonight's agenda. We do appreciate your input and want to hear from you. If you wish to offer a general visitor comment regarding a topic that is not on tonight's agenda, you can offer a comment at a future regular board meeting, the next of which is scheduled for August 10th. Now, I'd like to review the two methods that are available to offer public comment for tonight's meeting. For those of you who are here in attendance with us this evening and would like to offer a comment on items that are on the agenda, we ask that you please complete a speaker card that is available over near the door. Mr. Thigpen can raise his hand if you haven't found him yet. And you will be called on at the appropriate time during the agenda. Please indicate on the speaker card if you need translation services. It is the board's interest to consider all comments. If you are using an interpreter or self-translating your comment, we ask that translations be given as your comment is shared. Those who have indicated a need for translation when making their request to speak may be provided up to an additional 2 minutes to allow for translation of their original 2-minute comment. The second option is to submit a public comment online using the comment form located on the district website at www.sanjuan.edu/boardmeeting. If you wish to submit a public comment on more than one agenda item, please submit a separate form for each item on which you are commenting. For this special meeting, all written comments received through the public comment form will be read on the record during the meeting, subject to the time limits established in Board Bylaw 9323, which is 30 minutes. Comments may only be submitted on an agenda item up until the time the agenda item has been discussed. Please note that all public comments are subject to a 2-minute limit. or approximately 1,500 characters. With that, we are now at item D, approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes for July 13th? It's been moved by Ms. Costa. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Ms. Creason. This evening, as Dr. McKibben is joining us on the phone, we will be doing a roll call vote on all items. Mr. Hernandez, Ms. Costa, Ms. Creason, Dr. McKibben,
Aye.
and I vote aye. That was unanimous. We are at item E1, and there are no closed session actions to report. So that brings us to item F1, the California Voting Rights Act public hearing, map review public hearing number 2, Ms. Simwick.
And thank you and good evening, President Velasquez, board members, Superintendent Kern, and Ms. Cunningham. This evening, the board will hold 3 public hearings and deliberate on a variety of matters related to the district's transition to by-trustee area elections. Mr. Michael Smith from Lozano Smith is present and will provide an overview of the process the board will engage in this evening. After Mr. Smith finishes his presentation, Superintendent Kern will describe the community meeting process engaged in by the district. And then after that, Mr. Justin Rich, demographer from Cooperative Strategies, will discuss the 9 maps prepared for consideration by the board. Mr. Smith?
Well, good evening, members of the board. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. My name is Mike Smith with the Lozano Smith Law Firm, formerly of our Fresno office, but as of 1 week ago, I am now a partner in the Lozano Smith Sacramento office, having just moved here. So it's an honor to be here this evening. So tonight, we've created a PowerPoint presentation, and we're going to explain the complexities of the evening and how we've kind of structured how you can get through tonight's agenda. So I'd like to start with slide 1. If you can pull that up.
And while we're waiting for that to be pulled up, I will just politely make a request of Dr. McKibben to, as a reminder, to be on mute as the presentations go forward so that there's not as much feedback. And I think we're still working to get the slides up, so one moment.
Not the right. Did you change the? Oh, Okay.
Looks like we're in business.
I think we're ready.
think so too. Please proceed.
Okay, so this evening we've created a PowerPoint presentation to help guide the board through the conversation. So what I'd like to talk about first are what are the goals for tonight's meeting, the big picture goals. So if we step back in time, you'll remember that you've held 2 pre-map hearings and the board conducted its first map hearing on July the 13th. So we recommenced the process on July 1st and you're moving rapidly now through the process. Tonight, we will be conducting 2 additional board hearings and to gather all public input that's required by the California Voting Rights Act statute. So in addition to holding those public hearings, however, the board has asked to have a conversation about whether you desire to increase the size of the board from 5 to 7 members. So that will be a whole separate conversation, and that determination will affect which maps you ultimately will be discussing. After you've gone through the discussion of 5 to 7, you'll be involved in decision-making tonight for the first time. All the public input process will have been completed, and you will actually select a preferred map. You will also discuss election sequencing. All of those decisions will ultimately be wrapped up in a resolution that will be adopted by the governing board and presented to the Sacramento County Committee on School District Reorganization. So that ultimate resolution will initiate the proposal to change from at-large voting to by trustee area voting. You will select a map. You will decide whether you're going to increase your board composition, and you will make decisions on sequencing. All right, so you have a lot to accomplish tonight. In order to do that, we decided to create a roadmap to guide you through the process. So in effect, this is a decision tree, and we've created a 5-step process for you. So step 1 will be the discussion of the map hearing number 2, which is your public hearing on the draft map. After you've taken all of your public input, that will not be a decision-making time. That's a time for public comment. So you'll be hearing from the demographer. We're going to ask the superintendent to walk you through your process for community involvement, and then you'll conclude your public hearing in step 1. You will then go to step 2. Step 2 is the question of the board composition and its size. So you will decide whether or not you want to increase the size of the board from 5 to 7. If you decide to remain a 5-person board, we will proceed directly to step 3, and we will pull the agenda item related to the waiver with the State Board of Education. If, however, you decide you want to become a 7-person board, we're going to go to step 2A. Step 2A will involve a public hearing on the question of the waiver, and I will walk you through when we get there what that waiver is about. So we'll have a detailed conversation about what exactly you're seeking the state board, what are the requirements that are going to be waived. So once you've finished the waiver process, if you've decided to go to a 7-person map, you're now at step 3. At step 3, now you'll again conduct a public hearing. You'll notice there's lots of public input tonight. So once that public input's been concluded, then the board, of course, will be asking questions, and you'll have the opportunity to decide what is your preferred map. Once you've made a decision on the preferred map, we're going to take our decision tree down to step 4. At step 4, we'll talk about election sequencing. And because you're going to have maps that have vacant trustee areas, this is a fairly complicated conversation on the election sequencing. So we're going to save most of our comments on sequencing until we get to step 4. Once you've made all of those decisions, then we will get to the conclusion, which is the adoption of the resolution that codifies all that decision-making in a formal document that then initiates the process before the county committee. And by the way, the county committee hearing has been scheduled for August the 5th, and that meeting will be held here in these chambers. So we are now going to move to agenda item F1, which is step 1 in our process, and that is the public hearing. So you'll see in yellow on our roadmap that we're now going to begin the public hearing process. And I want to just remind the board and the members of the community that there were 4 maps that were published in the 5-trustee area. So assuming a 5-person board, you have 4 alternative maps to consider. With a 7-person board, you had 4 additional maps. However, there was community meetings, and based on the input that you all received from the community, we've created an additional map. So you now have 5 maps that relate to a 7 trustee board, a total of 9 maps. All right. So with that as background, let me turn the microphone over to Superintendent Kern and ask him to walk us through how the board went about the public outreach.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I want to take just a moment to kind of give an overview to the board and the community and those watching on YouTube tonight. The district conducted significant outreach to get the word out about our transition to by trustee area elections, the community meetings, and opportunities to provide feedback. We created a webpage, www.sanjuan.edu/elections, to house all the information related to the process, available in multiple languages, including Spanish, Arabic, Farsi Dari, Russian, and Ukrainian. A direct mailer postcard went out to every residential address within the San Juan Unified School boundaries. Several articles were posted to the district and school websites. We posted to our social media channels and ran advertising on Facebook. 2 mass notification messages, phone calls, and emails went out to all of our families. We ran ads online in the Citrus Heights Sentinel and in print in the Carmichael Times and Citrus Heights Messenger. Flyers were distributed with meals at our summer meal program locations. Information was sent to the local media, and email updates were sent to our community partners. We held community meetings on July 14th and 15th to gather feedback about the draft maps. On July 14th, we were at Dyer Kelly Elementary, Casa Roble Fundamental High School, and Mariloma High School, as well as online via Zoom. Approximately 63 community members attended in total the first evening. The next evening, we went to other sites. We held meetings at Greer Elementary, Mesa Verde High School, the district office, and again on Zoom, with approximately 45 community members in total attended on July 15th. Feedback collected at both meetings, as well as the video presentation from the meeting, were posted on the website at www.sanjuan.edu/public meetings. There may be duplication of preference stated, as we took into account comments made at board meetings as well as the community meetings, and some community members attended multiple meetings, but the majority of the feedback received in terms of preference for 5-member maps was maps 1 and 3, and for 7-member maps was 3 and 4. And as Mr. Smith mentioned, based on the feedback received, an additional 7-member map was created and published after the community meetings on July 20th.
Were we next going to hear from our demographer now? Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for having me tonight. So at the risk of being a little bit repetitive, let me just go through the maps that we've previously shared with you. This is a general location map just of the district and really our starting point when we started this process. You'll see that generally the district is situated between I-80 and Highway 50. It includes the city of Citrus Heights and small portions of the cities of Sacramento, Folsom, and Rancho Cordova. Additionally, there's several communities, and we have a map that will show this as well. Arden Arcade, Carmichael, Fair Oaks, Orangevale, Gold River, and North Highlands. We've included in this table the census data from 2010. As we shared previously with you, we're looking forward to that update. This information is relevant to just make sure that the district is remaining compliant throughout this process with the Federal Voting Rights Act. You'll see here that the total population is 321,259. Again, that's based on 2010 census data. As was mentioned, following the community input meetings, we created an additional scenario, and in particular, what we heard from the community was that it made sense from a community identity standpoint to extend, in this case, trustee area 1, which is the yellow portion of the map, to extend that into North Highlands. There was a belief that that more accurately or more favorably keeps communities together. In addition, to associate the eastern part of Arden Arcade with the area that's south of Fair Oaks, the neighborhoods of Campus Commons and Sierra Oaks. And then the second thing that we heard was that it was important to keep Citrus Heights together as much as possible. And so in order to accomplish that, what we've done, and let me see if I can share this next map here. This map shows with the green hatched area, those are the cities in and around the district. And then the blue lines represent the various unincorporated communities that comprise the district. And so you'll see, for instance, in the trustee areas 5, 6, and 7, that the boundaries really follow those city and community boundaries. And that's where we ended up. It's important to note that we have the demographic composition, population, and all of the ethnic composition for each one of the trustee areas. It's shown both in terms of total population and citizens voting age population. What this scenario did was create the largest minority community in one trustee area out of all of our scenarios. You'll see that in trustee area 1, based on citizen voting age population, that the minority, when we total that up, the minority population is approximately 45.5%. Again, that's the largest group of minority voters in a single trustee area based on all of our scenarios. And just to go back to the previous 8 scenarios that were reviewed with you all, in scenario 1, this particular scenario, what we aimed to do here was to group various areas as compactly and as tightly as possible, more focused on, again, smaller areas being compact and contiguous. A couple of notable statistics from that, the variance between the largest and the smallest trustee area in terms of population was 1.09%. The non-white citizens voting age population for area 1, which was the largest in this particular scenario, was 41.25% roughly. Now in scenario 2, we took a little different tact and we changed around how we followed some of these boundaries. In particular, you'll see that Arden Arcade and parts of Carmichael were split up differently. You'll notice that the variance is a little bit larger in this one, about 3.3% between the largest and the smallest trustee areas. The largest minority community, based on citizen voting age population, was in area 1, and that was roughly 35%. Scenario 3 was an iteration of scenario 2, tried to follow some of the community boundaries a little bit more closely. You'll see in this case, the variance was 1.4%, so back down smaller there. For trustee area 1, the non-white citizen voting age population, the largest of all the areas, was 34.6%. And then for scenario 4, this truly tried to follow and tried to keep together both city boundaries and community boundaries as closely as possible. The variance is a little wider here, 4.06%, and the non-white citizen voting age population for area 1 was 36.85%. Now for the 4 trustee area scenarios that we prepared for 7 trustees, scenario 1 started out similar, trying to keep compact and contiguous boundaries together. You'll see that the variance between the largest and the smallest areas was just about 4%, and the non-white citizen voting age population was largest in area 1 at 43.3%. Scenario 2, trying to follow along major roads and again, keeping Some communities together, the variance in scenario 2 was 2.6%. The non-white citizen voting age population was largest in area 2 at 38.6%. Now in scenario 3, that variance is a bit higher at 3.6%. The non-white citizen voting age population was largest in area 1 at 43.3%. And then scenario 4, this was another scenario that really focused on keeping, again, city and community boundaries together as much as possible. The variance is 3.56%. The non-white citizen voting age population, similar to scenario 3, was largest in area 1 at 43.3%. Are there any questions at all about those scenarios or anything that I can dive into a little bit deeper?
So at the conclusion of your presentation, Mr. Rich, which it sounds like we have reached, we're actually just for a matter of process and procedure, we're going to move into declaring officially the public hearing. And then we will bring it back to the board. So accordingly, I declare the topic of the proposed maps for potential composition of trustee areas a public hearing, and it is now open for public comment. We do have speaker cards for this item, and I'd like to remind the members of the public that comments are limited to 2 minutes, and the clock available here on the wall will count down the time. I will get us kicked off by reading the name of the first person who has signed up, and then also indicating at the same time who is kind of on deck, so you get a little bit of a warning when you might be next. And at this time, we are walking through any individuals who have expressed the desire to make public comment on agenda item F1. We will get started with Glenn Snyder, and then next up will be Fred Latu. Glenn, please begin when you are ready.
Good evening. My name is Glenn Snyder. I am a 30-plus year Carmichael resident. All of my children have gone through the San Juan public school system, and I applaud you guys for all the work that you've done to educate my kids. I think that representation is a great thing, and the more representation we have, the better. So I would support a 7-member board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Next up, we have Fred Latu, followed by Timothy Slate. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Fred Latu. I'm a 10-year resident of Citrus Heights. I currently have 3 children in the San Juan Unified School District. I wanted to also voice my support for the 7 trustee and map 3 or scenario 3. Thank you.
Next up, we have Timothy Slate, followed by Juan Iniguez.
Good evening, San Juan School Board. I am a product and a parent of the San Juan Unified School District. I would also like to offer my support for a 7 board member or board, yeah, 7 board members. Sorry, I'm having a brain fade right now. Yeah, I think more representation is definitely better for the constituency. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Juan Iniguez, followed by Carolina Flores.
Good evening. I wanted to suggest to you that none of your proposed maps are acceptable. They only look at race, which is unconstitutional. We have presented the district with other variables such as income, renters versus homeowners, etc. Those variables have been ignored. We have been consistent in asserting that any map that dilutes the voting strength of West Arden Arcade and Citrus Heights is not acceptable. Any map that divides Citrus Heights into more than 2 districts is unacceptable. All district maps related to West Arden Arcade combine the affluent from Sierra Oaks Vista with refugees and immigrants from La Paloma Way. Except for one, all maps include West Arden Arcade with all of Sierra Oaks, an affluent community very different from nearby marginalized communities. The new map with 7 trustees, scenario 5, includes all of North Highlands, thereby diluting the voting strength of people of color in West Arden Arcade. Your own demographer said, we look at the CVAP numbers so that we don't go right down the middle of that community and divide it into two voting areas and dilute the voting straight. But that's exactly what each map has done to West Arden Arcade. This evening, we're going to continue to propose an additional map. Our map is based entirely on block groups. That is the smallest areas with official estimates for 2019 and the citizen voting age population. It excludes the multi-million-dollar homes in Sierra Oaks and West Arden Arcade. According to your own timeline, you do not have to rush and make a decision this evening. I urge you to take more time to study our proposed map, do the right thing, and adopt it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Iniguez. Next up, we have Carolina Flores, followed by Scott Rafferty.
Muy buenos días, buenas noches. Esperamos aquí para determinar cuál mapa será el que más sirve a los latinos. Pero la gente ya está hablando abiertamente que estos mapas tienen datos falsos. ¿Qué es equidad? No es lo mismo que igualdad, no. Equity es, por ejemplo, la justicia, es justicia, en cuanto todos los estudiantes deben ser tratados con equidad y recibir las mismas oportunidades que todos. La semana pasada, la Asociación de Benito Juárez llevó 60 niños de las primarias, middle school y 2 de secundarias a Sacramento State University. El presidente del colegio los invitó al lunche, tuvieron varios programas del colegio que participaron para informar a esos estudiantes latinos los recursos y becas para pagar por su registración al colegio. Este tipo de ayuda directamente es como esta mesa directiva nos ha fallado año tras año. Ahí en donde ha fallado está la mesa directiva del distrito. Por negligencia hemos sufrido bajo 30 años de abuso a la gente latino, afroamericano, pakistaní que viven en la vecindad de secundaria de Encina, West Arden Arcade. Ustedes también tienen la autoridad, todos los padres de familia, de decirles a esta mesa que se esperen hasta septiembre cuando los padres de familia van a regresar a la escuela con sus niños, cuando van a tener el censo, cuando van a tener los datos verdaderos de cuántas gentes participan para tener representación. Que se esperen, ustedes espérense hasta septiembre para mantener su poder, se ve y pasar un mapa sin verdades de la comunidad. Pero así se llevan mal con nosotros. El censo va a estar ya completo y distribuido en unas semanas. Esta mesa directiva quiere ahogarnos con las mapas para manipular el condado. No se dejen. Si quieren esperar hasta septiembre para el censo, ustedes de padres, díganles.
Señora Flores, al
Yes.
terminar los 2 minutos, ¿necesita servicios de traducción? Gracias.
My presentation has to do with determining the map that is best for Latinos. People are already talking openly that these maps have false documents. What is equity? Equity is not the same as the sameness. No, equity, for example, is about justice, that all the students slip into Spanish, excuse me, all the students should be treated with equity and receive the same opportunities that there are for others. The Association of Benito Juárez took 60 kids to the college last week, children from primary school, children from middle schools, and 2 of them from the high school to Sacramento State University, where they had lunch with the president. They had also were informed of how to participate in the school, how to get your scholarships, and also this type of direct intervention is what this board needs to do to help the Latino students. There is where you have failed as a school board to help this district. This is like a negligence. We suffered for 30 years of abuse to the Latino, African-American, Pakistanis that have not received equal services in the West Arden Arcade area. You, the parents, have the authority to tell this board what you expect. You can ask them to wait until September, when all the parents will be back with their kids for school, when the census will be completed, and when we will have true data on how to base these maps. Otherwise, this is just a flimsy excuse to push through a map that is not correct, that is not giving us what we need. We are not get representation as Latinos in this community. And this presentation is from Carolina Flores, a grandmother advocating for justice for the Latino children residing in the District of San Juan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Flores. Next up, we have Scott Rafferty, followed by Maria Grijalva.
Before I begin, can I confirm that there'll be a further opportunity to discuss the specific maps in F4?
Correct.
Thank
So
you.
at each agenda item, there'll be an additional area for public comment.
You know, this is a
And your
difficult-
2 minutes will begin now, sir, just to make sure we're on the same page.
This has
Thank you, sir.
it's become a very difficult proceeding for everyone. And I'd like to start it off, in fact, to follow Ms. Flores, but just in the right tone. More than a year ago, we presented this map with 7 members. It was a win-win-win. It had an empty seat for Citrus Heights. We hadn't had a board member for 20 years. It had an empty seat that really hasn't changed that much in our view for Encina. Each of you had your own trustee area. And implementing it in 2020 would have allowed this group, which really remarkable in all the state, they doubled voter participation in 2020. That was what was so important about implementing it in 2020. And then there would be one of them, an authentic representative of this disempowered community, sitting at this table, drawing lines for the next decade. That's what we struggled for. And it was in harmony with all of your interests. What went wrong here? So I just want to open on that somewhat conciliatory note. And we've had this notion of which we've shared with you, of a district which has its 80% renters, has an unemployment rate of over 10%, has almost 80% of the limited English speaking heads of households in the entire district, which is so distinct from the rest of the district and so fundamentally underrepresented. As Dolores Huerta told the Supreme Court earlier this year, this is about neighborhoods that don't see anybody from their own barrio in any position of authority.
Thank you, Mr. Rafferty.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Maria Grijalva, followed by Michelle Wright.
Okay. I'll tell you what went wrong is called privilege. Maria Grijalva, I am the plaintiff that brought district elections to the school board in West Sacramento. I am a community organization, a nonprofit that serves the Sacramento area. The California Voting Rights Act was written to protect minority vote from being diluted, to help minorities elect a candidate of their choice. The reason this law was written in place is because there was an overrepresentation of white candidates in office, thanks to Jim Crow voting systems like at-large elections. District elections cures this racist voting system. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Ginsburg called at-large elections the oldest trick in the book for local racist public officials that want to keep themselves in power, and this is what's happening right now. And so having a surname that's Latina really doesn't help you right now at all. And so never in my life have I witnessed public officials like San Juan Unified School District, including a superintendent and their attorneys, fight so hard to keep power in place and rush a process when you could wait until September. Shame on you. You have lied to the community over and over and over. You have misled the public. You didn't tell the public why the maps were being drawn. The maps were being drawn to keep the minority communities together. And instead, people were given the impression that they could draw it based on their own whims, and it's not. Shame on you. I hope at the next court hearing, the judge lets you have it. And there's no other word for this, and it's called racism. It's self-serving. What you're doing is self-serving. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grijalva. Next up, we have Michelle Wright, followed by Magali Kincaid.
Hi, good evening. Michelle Wright. I'm a resident in SJUSD. What I'm hearing from members and community is that the revised and the new maps still don't adequately address the representation issues that exist and that we're trying to fix. So maybe pause, hold another hearing on this matter, and include maybe additional data in the way that you draw these maps. Furthermore, this is a really important decision. So yeah, we should maybe take a breath, right? Because this decision is going to shape the future of the district and the outcomes of students. So it's important that we have representation for historically excluded areas, because we've also seen that the outcomes of students in those areas is worse than areas that have had overrepresentation in the past. So that seems to have a clear correlation. And I strongly urge you to consider that in the way that you draw these maps.
Thank you. Next up, we have Ms. Magali Kincaid, followed by Michael Seaman.
Good evening. My name is Magali Kincaid, and I have several children about to start school in this district. Your maps do not do West Arden Arcade justice. I appreciate some of the changes I could see maybe, but it still didn't hit the mark. The district has found a way to chop West Arden Arcade in every map or lumped it together with really wealthy neighborhoods, washing out the power of the underrepresented communities that live in those areas. As a reminder, these are the communities in West Arden Arcade, which include underrepresented, underserved students and families, including many refugee families. I'm asking you to take a breath, take a pause. Don't rush this process. Add an additional hearing so that we can go over the actual data transparently with community. Draw maps that include and consider income inequality, the renters, environmentally impacted neighborhoods, and all of that we can find within West Arden Arcade. On November 14th, 2019, the SAC-B wrote an article about Encina. Specifically, the article brought to light the grave inequities and the segregation happening at Encina, and the fact that this neighborhood has a stark economic divide, incorporating very wealthy and very poor neighborhoods, and it struggles to serve a student body of refugees and children living in poverty. So I implore you to pause. Don't rush this. We need to get it right, because those communities have been underrepresented for far too long, and we need to make sure we get it right. And it doesn't have to do with, on this side or that side, or it's really, this is about those communities and the students that have been failed by the district for over 20 years. You know the data on those districts and those communities. We gotta do them right.
Thank you, Ms. Kincaid. Next up, we have Michael Seaman.
Thank you, board members. It's a pleasure to be here again, and I do like the fact that you're looking at the 7 districts instead of 5. I think that's the way it should be. I am very concerned about West Arden Arcade. It looks to me like the way you've structured things with your revised maps, that you still have arranged for the people on the east side of Watt Avenue to control what goes on the west side of Watt Avenue, and that's a real problem. You really need to set it up so that the people on the west side of Arden Arcade can have their own representative, the west side of Watt Avenue, excuse me. I would make one slight exception to that, and that's Del Paso Manor. Del Paso Manor is on the east side of Watt, but basically the people who live there are in the exact same boat as the people on the other side of Watt Avenue. They've been left alone and forgotten for a long, long time. And I really think that it would make sense for you to take your section number 1, trustee area 1, have it exclusively on the west side of Watt, with the exception of Del Paso Manor. And I do think that you can end it somewhere in the vicinity of Sierra Oaks Vista. The city of Sacramento part below Fair Oaks Boulevard kind of is the same community of interest as the people in the rest of Area 3 that are south of Fair Oaks Boulevard. So for Area 3, I think you should add Arden Oaks and Arden Park Vista, because they're basically all the same kind of neighborhood, and Sierra Oaks, but stay south of Fair Oaks Boulevard. And then for District 2, I think you can push that east to either Garfield or even better, I think, Fair Oaks Boulevard. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was the end of our in-person of our cards for individuals who have indicated they'd like to speak at this time. So we are going to move to written comments. I'm going to check in with staff. I believe we do have written comments. I see a raised hand. So Mr. Thigpen, I'll invite you to read the written comments for item F1 at this time.
Thank you. We have one written comment for agenda item F1. This was submitted by Padre Organized Community, and they wrote, "Good evening. We have been following along with the organizing around redistricting and expansion of the board since the winter of 2019. In the beginning, it sounded like a good idea, but as the fight progressed on, the community heard less and the goal remained unclear. The Latino community was approached on more than one occasion, and after hearing the advocates and allies name off the list, we understand why many did not support this. It was disheartening to hear our students and communities spoken of with stigma to support a need, and then hear comment after comment asking for exclusive representation for Citrus Heights and Arden North Highlands, excluding groups to fend for themselves for representation and equity. This is the exact opposite of inclusion and equity. We also would like to point out that many of those Latino individuals and organizations not only do not reside or serve in the district, they all represent or reside in areas that are some of the largest contributors to the open enrollment population our district serves. We are anxious to see what will happen to this destination district as a system that has proven to be dysfunctional in 2 local districts is being implemented at this district. We are demanding that this board evaluate how the new representation has impacted student success and community involvement every 4 years. We want a commitment to ensure that San Juan continues to provide the programs, services, and supports that have made it a destination district for at least the last decade. Thank you."
That is our only written comment. So there being no further comments at this time, I declare the public hearing closed. We will now turn it to the dais for questions and discussions, but I think first and foremost, I wanted to just start with a clarifying question. There was a theme that came up around the timeline, and even Mr. Smith, as you walk through the timeline and discuss the many hearings being compressed into one timeline, it's notable, right? Like, I don't think that that's anybody's ideal timeline. So and Mr. Spinelli, I know you're here and have served as counsel on behalf of the district. Can you please walk through how we've ended up with the timeline that we have and some of the constraints that we've been operating with?
I'd be glad to. Good evening. I do represent the district in the litigations, and I began that representation in about October of last year. In approximately January of last year, Mr. Rafferty, on behalf of his clients, made a demand for this board in this district to go to trustee-based area elections. This board passed a resolution, and then COVID hit, and the governor issued emergency orders stopping various processes, including this. Once Mr. Rafferty under the law makes a demand such as this, and the board passes a resolution, there's a 90-day period called a safe harbor period, where a district can move to district area-based elections, and if completed within that 90 days, then there should be no litigation filed, and the limitation under the law of attorney's fees is limited to $33,000 approximately. If the board or the district goes beyond that time frame, then they are exposed to much more in attorney's fees and potential litigation, even hundreds of thousands of dollars in attorney's fees. So when this board, when the governor ended the stay-at-home orders and rescinded the order that stopped the safe harbor process here on June 30th, this board recommenced this process as it intended to go to district area elections. Prior to that, and since that time, both formally in the litigation and informally, we have asked the plaintiffs and Mr. Rafferty to agree to 80 days. There's a potential under the law that the interpretation of the days left are either 41 or 80. We have specifically over and over asked, they have refused to grant 80 days. They've refused to give us that amount of time, which would be the extra time that people have asked for tonight. So in order to stay within the safe harbor provisions, as best as we can analyze, we are proceeding, this board is proceeding under 41 days. And to then complete the process within that time frame and to try and end the litigation and reduce any exposure monetarily to the district.
Thank you for that clarification. And I would just ask that you yourself, Mr. Smith and Mr. Rich, be on hand for any questions as we then turn it over back to the dais for conversations and comments. I am going to kind of go through dais order, particularly given that Dr. McKibben is joining us remotely. I want to make sure we're capturing all comments and discussions. So at this point, I'll turn it to questions and comments, and I'll start with Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you. I appreciate it. First of all, I appreciate all the feedback that we've received from everybody in all aspects of communication. And I just want to be very clear, Mr. Spinelli, from what you said, because of the lawsuit that we're under, we're trying to comply with that timeline. Is that correct? That 41 days of the safe harbor. Is that correct? And
sorry, Mr. Hernandez, I don't mean to interrupt, but for any further answers, can you please approach the microphone? I want to make sure Dr. McKibben can hear. Thank you. No worries.
sorry, I'll wait for you to get there. And then because we've heard several comments tonight from our community that use the word take a breath, wait. And in essence, when we asked their attorney for that extra time, we have not heard from or got a response to get that extra time. Is that correct?
No, there's been responses, but the response has not been an agreement to the 80 days.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Costa.
First, Mr. Spinelli, thank you very much for that, because I think people thought we were in a rush just to be in a rush, and we are in a rush because we are in a timeline that could end up costing the district hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that really affects our students. And I remember making that comment more than a year ago and having people bash me for it, but I think money that is spent, that is not spent on students, is a loss for our district. So thank you for your comment. That really explained it, I think, clearly. I wanted to address to the superintendent my thanks for the communication efforts that took place. I have never seen the district do so many different types of communication to get people informed. And from the mailers to the Facebook to the flyers at school lunches, I think everything that has been mentioned to you, you've made happen. So I really thank you and staff for really making an honest attempt to communicate to our community. And then to our community, I really thank everybody who has emailed and come to meetings and called to express their point of view. I think it's really important to understand point of view is different. It doesn't mean that everybody agrees. There are varying points of view. But I have really appreciated hearing from our community. So thank you very much.
Ms. Creason.
Thank you. I want to start my remarks in support of President Villescaz. You are a beautiful Latina woman, and no one defines who you are. You are who you are. So I support you. Okay. So I was a little taken back by the timeline thing too. I've said it several times on dais that it wasn't a district decision. It was a Zima thought that we should wait for census, wait for data. Before COVID, we could go in and we could look at minutes on the statement. I always wanted that to happen. A lawsuit happened. It put us in a box that nobody wanted to be in, but we have no choice but to follow the rules that we were put in. So just for the record, I wish that we had more time too. It was never my desire to rush this process, but this is where we're at, and that's why. So I appreciate the detailed explanation of why we're here. A couple things. I know we have a couple of hearings and a couple of times to talk, so I'm hopefully saying what I want to say in the right spots. Could a staff person, I know we have it in the packet, all the criteria that was used, and we have, during the special meetings, board members shared additional criteria we wanted to be considered, like from district. I think it would be helpful, because I did hear in public comments that there's concern that only one piece of data was used or one piece of criteria. Can we do an overview or point folks to the place in the packet where that information is, please?
Yeah, Ms. Simlick, I don't have that with me in terms of that resolution specific to the criteria. And I don't believe it is posted on the websites that we identified.
I'll find it. It's in here somewhere. I'll find it and I'll point folks to it. No problem. If you find it first, Ms. Costa, that'd be awesome. I think it's important because it's a good question. What are we?
Looks like Mr. Smith might.
Hello,
be able
Mr.
to help
Smith.
us out.
I take that back. Okay, let me.
In resolution
It's under F6.
3059,
Yeah.
the board adopted a resolution outlining criteria defining communities of interest. And let me see what date that was signed. That was done at the July 1st board meeting by a 5-0 vote.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, Ms. Creason, it is under F6 and it's Exhibit A there.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I just want to point folks to it because it's a great question. What criteria was used? And it is outlined in the board packet. You can review minutes. There was other discussions during the special meetings by the board offering additional criteria to be considered. So it was not based on one piece of data. I want to acknowledge, and I'm going to make sure I say this right. I want to acknowledge both from Sierra Oaks community and Encina community. I've received multiple communications of concern of them both being in the same district. And I had mixed feelings because some folks feel that, diverse socioeconomic communities bring value. And then there's another train of thought that, well, if you mix two communities with different socioeconomic realities, that those with more means can overpower the voice of those without. And that is a huge consideration. So I'm just bringing this up to say I hear that very well, and I acknowledge that. And this kind of leads back to, I too wish we had more time to have some deep conversations because it's a big deal. And unfortunately, we continue to be in this box. I think I'll save the rest of the comments as we move forward.
Okay, we'll turn it to Dr. McKibben. Dr. McKibben, you may be on mute.
Thank you. Sorry. First, I want to thank all those people that showed up to the community forums, representing their neighbors, talking about what would benefit their neighbors. I suspect that none of those people who came to those meetings, as well as none of the people, even those that spoke today, are more interested in if we continue the process on or pause it, as some people have caused it, it will cost us literally hundreds of thousands of dollars that would not go to our children, but would go to lawyers. And I don't think any of us want that to happen. Secondly, I want to say that what we're trying to do is going to trustee-based district. We must continue to understand that board members must represent all of the children and all of the parents of the entire district. Representation is very important, but in fact, we will be changing the representation by the very fact that we are going to trustee-based districts. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McKibben. And I'll just do one quick check to see if there's any additional comments or questions at this time. As has been noted, there'll be many more opportunities to address questions and comments. And at this time, the public hearing and item F1 has been completed. So we will move to item F2, the California Voting Rights Act, potential increase from 5 board members to 7 board members. Mr. Smith, I believe you're serving as MC for the evening, so I will invite you to join us again.
We are now at agenda item F2, which is the discussion of the 5 to 7. There we go. So we have highlighted there, we're at step 2. So a few preliminary comments. First of all, California law does regulate the size of a school board, and a 5-member board is the default size of a school board. So we have a handful of school districts in the state of California that are so small that they have chosen to go to the county committee and become a 3-person board. Very unusual. Right? At the other end of the spectrum, you have a number of school districts in the state that have become 7-person boards. Most typically that happens through a reorganization process. So for example, elementary district and a high school district might merge and become a unified district. You might have an elementary board with 5 members, a high school board with 5 members. Those 2 districts merge and become a unified district. In order to ensure representation throughout the district, they create a 7-person board. Very, very common. So that's how the most common method in which boards go from 5 to 7. Right? Many of the large school districts throughout the state of California are also 7-person boards, and oftentimes that does happen through the unification process. Many of your neighbors, as you know, Elk Grove, Sac City, those are 7-person boards. So it is regulated by law, and typically boards are 5 to 7. In order to go from 5 to 7, that requires county committee approval, right? And the movement from 5 to 7 is not required by the California Voting Rights Act. So the California Voting Rights Act, the focus is on the manner in which trustees are elected. So the goal is to move from an at-large election system into a by-trustee area election system. If you do that, which of course you've already indicated you are going to do, then you are moving into that safe harbor that's been discussed earlier. So the movement from 5 to 7 isn't inherently connected to the California Voting Rights Act transition into the manner in which trustees are elected. Increasing the size of a school board can create governance challenges. At the same time, it makes it easier for people to run for the school board because you have smaller trustee areas, so less cost, less energy. Now, in terms of timing, how would we go from a board of 5 to a board of 7? A few preliminary comments, and then we'll have more of this discussion if you decide to do this, and we'll talk about the waiver. So in terms of timing, the board would need to seek a waiver, this board, from the State Board of Education in order to allow the increase. So if you decide to make the movement, you'll get county committee approval. Presumably that would happen at the August 5th county committee hearing. And then subsequent to that, we would need to take this to the State Board of Education. Now the lead time to get on the agenda for the state board is in fact months. So we would predict that that state board would be hearing this at its meeting on November 3rd or 4th. So probably late in 2021. If the board approves the waiver request, what's the result? You would go from a 5-person board to a 7-person board. And those 2 additional trustees would be elected during the November 2022 election. So between now and the November 2022 election, you would be a 5-person board. So at the November 2022 election, which then 2 new trustees would be elected. And what the law says is those 2 new trustees they would begin office on the 2nd Friday in December. Okay, so then mid-December of 2022, about the time you normally hold your annual organizational meeting, that's when those new board members would be seated. And at that point in time, you would become a 7-person board. And of course, with a 7-person board, you'd need 4 votes, right, to act. So that's the overview of the process going from 5 to 7. If you decide you want to go that way, we will move to step 2A, and I'll walk you through more detail that's involved in seeking that waiver from the State Board of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. At this time, we will call for public comment on this item. We do have speaker cards for this item, and I'd like to remind the public that comments are limited to 2 minutes, and the clock on the wall will count down the time. As I did last time, I'll call the individual who is up next and concurrently call the next individual so that you're prepared to follow. First, we have Susie Murray, followed by Glenn Snyder. Susie, please begin when you're ready.
Good evening. My name is Susie Murray, Del Paso Manor resident, and in about 2 weeks, a San Juan parent. I just want to add my voice to those who have called for greater representation with a larger board. My kid is a single, only child of 2 professionals, and it's not a level playing field with kids in West Arden Arcade and Citrus Heights. Those kids need a fair playing field. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Glenn Snyder, followed by Timothy Slate.
Good evening again, board members. My name is Glenn Snyder, and I support a 7-member board. Changing to that. Also, I applaud you guys for your hard work under this stressed timeline to do all the work that you're doing. I actually, my kids went to Rio. I've seen firsthand the manipulation that can be done to you guys from attorneys trying to get their way, not necessarily looking out for the students or the families in the area, but their own needs. So thank you for all your work.
Next up, we have Timothy Slate, followed by Scott Rafferty.
Good evening again. Thank you for taking time. I also want to applaud you guys for your work on this. I support the 7 trustee increase and map 7.3. I don't know if I said that previously. I also kind of want to just take a point to, I find it very ironic and kind of like despicable that, you know, the reason that you guys can't take more time on this is because of the lawsuit that's being held against you guys. And I do think it's kind of ironic that some of the same people that are bringing the lawsuit forward are also sitting in here tonight pushing for more time. So thank you guys for this stressful time. Thank you for your hard work in this. And yeah, have a good night.
Thank you. Next up, we have Scott Rafferty, followed by Maria Grijalva.
Much of what Mr. Smith has said about the history is true. You were founded in the 19th century, before the nativist period, which did try to reduce the size of governing boards, but most school boards have been 5-member boards. But what is more unusual is that you are now the second largest 5-member board in the state of California. And the state of California is even more unusual compared to the rest of the country. There are only a handful, 2 or 3 maybe, out of the top. You're the 85th largest in the country. So, there's no accusation here. This wasn't, the 5-member board wasn't a conspiracy, but it's time for change. And we will work with you in terms of the one thing that I think he misperceives is 10,010B about sequencing trumps the provisions of the education code. And we can work with you either out of court or in court to get a sequence that makes sense. I personally think, for the interest of democracy, we should have 4 people elected in the presidential year, ideally including the minority remedial district. We made that work in West Contra Costa with the same attorneys. We can do it here. I do feel at some point I need to address this issue about the census. There is because that's come up in recent comments. We sent the attorneys a letter in September, email in September of 2020 saying, please, let's agree not to do this until after the census. And the response, I don't think the board knows about this because it was addressed to the administration and what they would recommend, made clear that there would be we would have to concede that we would not sue until, continue that comment later, but
Thank
it
you,
is
Mr.
extremely
Rafferty.
important.
Next up, we have Maria Grijalva, followed by Shirley Hall.
I say everything I say with the utmost respect. I'm sorry it sounds so harshly. Forgive me, but I don't take it back. I love that everybody participates. I do thank everything. I do thank you for this opportunity to speak. It is my constitutional right to speak. As I've indicated before, I've never seen so many public officials be so manipulative. Blaming the safe harbor period for this fast track is very, very manipulative. Why don't you I'm sorry that Mr. Scott Rafferty didn't do that. Why don't you tell the public why the lawsuit was filed against you before that 45-day safe harbor period? Because presumably, if you had followed the law, a lawsuit would not have been filed against you. But what ended up happening is that a lawsuit ended up being filed against the school district. Isn't that a fact? Yes, it is. Okay, so tentative ruling is already happening, and there's a new court hearing happening that's been delayed and postponed. And so you are in litigation right now because you were manipulative. And so you've come up here and told the public, we're doing this fast track because we are being threatened and under this safe harbor. But you're not telling the public that you already are being sued. Okay, so you're being manipulative again. You're not telling the truth. You're being manipulative. And by the way, I think we should have 7 members. Thank you.
Next up, we have Shirley Hall, followed by Michael Seaman.
Good evening. I'm here as a parent of 2 children who went through San Juan Unified School District, but more than that, I'm here as a teacher who taught in this district for over 25 years. I'm now retired, but I still care deeply about my district. And most of my years, all of my time, was spent at Howe Avenue and Greer and Dyer Kelly and Marshall Children's Center and Lycan Elementary. And these are all places, schools, where it's a blessing that we are such a diversified district. But that is also, makes it really, really difficult. Because I can remember sitting in meetings when I was teaching at Howe Avenue, and there were teachers that didn't even have a clue what in the world we were talking about or what our needs were. I think we have to have 7 members on this board, and we have to make sure that the West End is well represented and that we hear all the voices in this district, because there is poverty all over this entire district. It's not just, there's pockets of it. I live in Citrus Heights. There's pockets of it in Citrus Heights. You need to hear those voices. And that's what's really, really important. And I'm sorry that it will be 2 years before you can possibly get a 7-member board on here, because that's what you need. And you need the voices, and you need to hear from those people, because I did for over 25 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, our final individual who has submitted a public comment card is Michael Seaman, and then we will move to written comments. Please begin when you're ready.
Thank you, board members. The San Juan Unified School District is very big and has a lot of people. So a few minutes ago, we heard that how important it is for you to serve the children and the parents of the district. Well, obviously it is, but that's not the only people that you have to serve. You're required to serve all individuals, all the businesses, all the taxpayers. Everybody depends on you guys doing a good job. And so having 7 people means that you'll get better representation. 7 trustee areas means that you'll be better able to serve and the areas of Arden Arcade and Citrus Heights that deserve to have better representation. So I'd really love to see you go to 7. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have one additional public commenter, Ms. Magali Kincaid.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Magali Kincaid, and I'm a mom of 3 kids enrolled starting school soon in the district. And representation, I mean, you're all sitting here because we all believe that representation is incredibly important, I hope. And that I believe it's incredibly important. Waiting until 2022 or 2024, if you decide a 7 trustee area, which I advocate for, is how you're going to transition, that's too late. Why should we have to wait for a representative that lives in our neighborhood? That's not doing that justice. You need to hold a special election to seat those people, those new representatives on the board. We shouldn't have to wait. That's contrary to all of the discussions about representation, democracy, and having true representatives on the school board. You've heard from the community, they want a 7-member board. Why do we have to wait? You should definitely have a special election to make sure that the voices that the community is asking for are seated on this board to help make decisions now, not later. Thank you.
That's the conclusion of our in-person public comments. We do have written comments submitted at this time. I will ask Mr. Thigpen to please read those aloud.
Thank you. We have one written comment submitted for item F2. This is from Tawny Parr. And Tawny writes, I write to express my support for a 7-member board instead of a 5-member board. I believe this is important to enhance representation for each area within SJUSD. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes public comment at this time. So we will now move to board member comments and questions. I'll begin with Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you. I will be very brief. I just want to thank the community for this past year, this topic. And we've heard all the voices and the emails and the calls, and I really do appreciate it. And when we started this process, I stated that I would be active in listening to the community interests and to make a decision that I felt best represented our community. And that being said, I support 7 members.
Ms. Costa.
Parent wrote in the written comments, quote, I'm not sure. I see the pros and cons of 5 and 7, end of quote. I smiled because I can too. From personal experience of talking with board members during California School Board Association events before COVID, those with 7-member boards frequently talked of the frustration of not being able to get agreement on many important issues with the 7-member board. There are exceptions, Elk Grove in our own region has a 7-member board, and their district is doing very well. A community member wrote in the written comments, quote, "Other large school districts such as San Diego, the highly acclaimed Long Beach District, and Corona Norco Unified School District have 5-member boards. I think San Juan has done well with 5 board members, having 7 years of positively certified budgets, award-winning bond projects resulting in new schools, and new buildings, and a staff that has continued to provide the best possible education under impossible circumstances. So if this decision, if this were a decision that I would be making totally on my own, my decision would be different than the one I'm making tonight. I pledged that I would take into account the community feedback. I have listened and taken notes during the visitor comments at board meetings, read every email, read and took notes on all of the written comments, and attended the community meetings at Dyer Kelly and the district office, and read the feedback from the meetings that occurred simultaneously with the Dyer Kelly and district office meetings. I compared names and factored out people who spoke at multiple meetings, sent multiple emails, and made multiple written comments so that everyone was represented once. With all of that, the overwhelming comments are in favor of a 7-member board. I am honoring my commitment to listen to the community and move forward with the 7-member board.
Thank you, Ms. Costa. Ms. Creason.
Thank you. Wasn't SJUSD a merger?
Once upon a time, yes.
Like
I think
many
it
moons
was
ago?
Arden Elementary, Arcade Elementary. It was.
But it was multiple districts at one point. That's a good point. That's a good point to know. And I have to say too, we heard from a lot of people with a lot of different feedback and really good rationale for 7 and 5. One of the most compelling, there were several compelling arguments, but one of the most compelling for 5 was, well, when I think about my community, it's bigger than what a 7 will give me. My kid goes to, or is part of some league here, and I grocery shop here, and, their scope is bigger. And that was very compelling. And I want to acknowledge that I absolutely heard that. And that's the case when I think about where I live and where my family, where we revolve, it's bigger. However, there is a strong argument to be made that, our district's just so big and so diverse with very, very, very different needs. And keeping at 5, it kind of does go back to the comment I made earlier of the gives and takes of, if we're blending socioeconomic diversity or not, and what that means for community. So it's a really hard decision because I can really see pros and cons to both. My perspective on this the whole time was I wasn't going to make any decisions until I heard all the feedback, because I could go either way. Based on feedback, I definitely think 7 is the way to go. And I'll leave it at that for now. Actually, no, I won't. That's what I wanted to say about that. But I do want to comment a little bit about some of the public comments. It is true. We were not a by-district board. The lawsuit happened because we were at large, and we can't do that anymore. That's absolutely true. That's absolutely where it came from. I can't speak to, this is my first term, so I'm not here to make excuses for anyone. Yes, that's what happened. I'm not going to take responsibility for those decisions because I wasn't here. It was always my intent to do all that I can to ensure that by 2022 election that we were by district, and that's where we're going to be. So I think that's a win. I think this is the first time that I've ever heard a request for a special election, and I could be wrong on that.
No, I don't know that there are many items that would require a special election. Mr. Smith, could you kind of address what would require a special election beside this, and maybe even the time frame of when that would take place? Because would it have to be after a waiver was heard by so just the factors of that and whether or not there are costs associated.
The law does prescribe the process by which these 2 vacancies would be filled if you decide to go to a 7-person board. And we'll talk about that more detailed in a moment. But it is not possible to simply call a special election before November 2022 and fill these 2 vacant seats. So when we talk about the waiver, we're going to talk about Education Code Section 5022. I know that's getting very specific and down in the weeds, but that's the code section that describes the process in which it talks about appointing people, but it's a difficult section. And so we'll discuss that more with the waiver, but the process really that's going to be required by law is if you decide to become a 7-person board, you would do that through the election process in November of 2022.
Thank you for that, because that's not a conversation we've had before, so that's helpful to know. My instinct was 2022 is next year. It's not far away, and again, I recognize, I acknowledge, I can't say much about why we are already here. All I could say is what we're doing now. So I look forward to hearing more about the whys of that. Okay, now I'm done for now.
Next up, we'll turn it over to Dr. McKibben.
And I get myself unmuted this time.
We can hear you.
Thank you. By moving to trustee-based districts, we are moving from each of us representing, if you will, the entire district, or approximately 300,000, down to moving somewhere between 50 and 60,000 things. That means that, and it's very important that we do that, and our representation indeed would be, we would have 5 times fewer people to talk to interact with, to represent. I think by moving to trustee-based districts, we in fact are accomplishing the notion of representation. As I listened to the people that came out in the community that I've lived in for 38 years, and they said they couldn't see the reason why we would move to 7 members, 7 trustee districts versus 5. Heard some similar kinds of comments related to Citrus Heights. In the almost 40 years that I've been working with school districts and working with literally 900 school districts in this state, one of the things that I heard was very similar to what Ms. Costa said, and that is those that had moved to 7 trustee members found it harder to reach agreement. They found that their discussions were more robust. They found that indeed there was less interaction with their doing. I do not believe that moving to 7 trustees would be a triumph of good governance. I think it would be a triumph for politics in order to try to find ways for certain people to find a district that they might be able to be elected in. Therefore, I propose that we remain with 5 trustees representing each of those people greater. I was impressed with the data that Mr. Hernandez brought to us earlier when we noted that indeed by moving to trustee-based elections, we would be representing people within a 15 square mile area, and that if we went to 7, it would only be an 11 square mile area. Either the 15 or the 11 would make us a district, even of our size, to be the second smallest in geographic area representation. I just believe that it's better governance to stay at 5, to have more robust conversations, to be able to work out things, to talk to each other, to listen very carefully. And we will accomplish that by moving to trustee districts. I don't think that 7 rather than 5 takes us further. And in fact, I think that we will rue the day that we do that when we move to 7, in terms of, I so fear that there will be districts, and we don't have to go too far from us to see those, where 7-member districts say things about what's in it for me. And I look back at the schools that we have built on the east side of the school district. Frankly, I don't believe they would have been built if indeed we would have had 7 districts saying, why are they getting the money and we're not? We simply can't do that to our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McKibben. And thank you to my colleagues for the discussion. I'm going to do a quick check real quick to make sure there's no further questions at this time. Okay. The process of moving to bi-district elections is not typically used to also expand a Board of Education, as Mr. Smith discussed earlier. Most Board of Education expansions occur when an elementary or a high school district is consolidated. This is evidenced by the fact that as we have explored more and more, the complicated nuance of statute, outdated statute doesn't fully contemplate every outcome of the scenarios that we've been presented. And as I stated in meetings prior, I'm not completely convinced that more people on this dais result in better governance and better outcomes for our students. However, up until that time, we had not yet seen the draft maps. Once we had those in hand, and after seeing the maps that were drafted for consideration, the maps with 7 districts generally did a better job of combining and representing our communities of interest, both educational and otherwise. I believe that they better represented our wonderfully diverse community and where our neighbors live, where our kids go to school, and where our families shop and work. I hear and I understand the point that more people means more representation, and I don't dispute that. That's an objective numerical truth. However, it doesn't necessarily mean better representation. And while I still have some reservations about growing the size of the board, I have concluded that the culture that a governance team builds matters just as much as how many people sit on this dais. That has always been our responsibility to create and to sustain, and it will continue to be our responsibility, and one that I know we will continue to fulfill. So with that, I will be supporting the move from 5 board members to 7 board members. Seeing no further questions or comments at this time, is there a motion to increase board membership from 5 board members to 7 board members at this time?
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Hernandez. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Ms. Creason. We will do a roll call vote. Mr. Hernandez? Ms. Costa? Ms. Creason? Dr. McKibben?
No.
And I vote aye. So that was 4 ayes and 1 no. And that motion has passed. We are now at agenda item F3. Because the board took action to increase the board membership of 5 board members to 7 board members, we are at item F3. California Voting Rights Act, public hearing and adoption of a resolution directing the superintendent to seek a waiver from the State Board of Education related to increasing board members to 7. Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith, if you could even raise that podium a little bit more so the mic reaches.
Okay, as our board president indicated, we are now at agenda item F3, and that is the public hearing on the potential adoption of a waiver from the State Board of Education. So having grappled with this decision of 5 to 7, and I commend your deliberation, that was not an easy decision. So having made that decision to move to 7, we're now at step 2A, the section that's highlighted there in our roadmap. So let's talk for a second about what this waiver process would look like. So as I indicated earlier, the first thing that's going to happen is that this would get folded into a resolution that would go to the county committee, and the county committee approval would be required. So what is it that we're going to waive? That's what we're talking about. So the first piece here is that if the county committee approves your move from 5 to 7, in the absence of a waiver, you're required to go get electorate approval. So the question of 5 to 7 has to go to a special election. And that special election would be held in April of 2022. So that generates a cost for a district of your size, which you would pay alone, of several hundreds of thousands of dollars. So our recommendation to avoid the cost of that special election is to go ahead and file for the waiver from the state board so that you could move forward without incurring that cost. And then that would result in bullet number 3 with a regularly scheduled election in November 2022, where those 2 vacancies would be filled. So now, I apologize in advance for this, but now is where I need to kind of get down in the weeds a little bit, as I indicated. So the waiver that we're talking about is primarily centered on Education Code Section 5022. So we would be seeking county committee approval and then going to the state board saying, let us out from underneath the election requirement and all those costs, and then let us out from underneath the process that's described in Section 5022. Because in the absence of the waiver, what would happen is the board would be required to make 2 appointments to the 2 new vacancies. But here's the catch. Those appointments, by law, 1 appointment would go into effect in, and I'm using the language out of the statute, the appointee's term would expire on the first Friday of December in the next succeeding odd numbered year. That's confusing, right? So what that would mean is that you would have an election, you would have an appointment, and the term of that appointee would be expiring in the next succeeding odd number year, which is 2023. All right, and then the second appointee would go until the second succeeding odd numbered year, which is 2025. All right, so what we wind up with is a situation where this education code makes this process for you very, very problematic and very difficult, and it does not mesh with your voting system. Why? Because you have even-yeared elections. All right, many, many years ago, a lot of school districts had odd-year elections, but those have been folded into even-year elections so that you're with the general election cycle. So your elections are 2022 and 2024. So the reason that you would be seeking a waiver is to stay with your current system of the even year election cycle. And it also allows for the people to speak, if you will, right? Because those 2 vacancies would be filled not by appointment, but by an election process. So the people would elect those 2 new board members. The second bullet point, the Education Code Section 5022 was not updated.
Sorry, just quickly. Dr. McKibben, do you mind going on mute? We're getting a little bit of feedback. Thank you. Please proceed.
A few years ago, there was an Education Code section that was amended, and that was Section 5017, and it talks about the timing of when board members' terms expire. So under the current law, board members' terms expire on the second Friday in December. But the legislature never thought about they needed to do cleanup on Section 5022. So it incorrectly references old law and has the board members' terms expiring on the first Friday in December. So the long story short here is, having made the decision to go to the 7-person board, we're recommending that you seek the waiver so that you can avoid the cost of a special election, stay with your even year election cycle, and avoid this situation where you wind up having to make appointments that expire in odd numbered years. So it's very problematic and kind of generates a mess, if you will. A very non-legal term to describe what happens if you don't wind up getting the waiver. And I should comment that we have spoken with staff at the State Board of Education about the waiver process and what that would look like, and try to get examples of how we would submit the waiver. And this is an issue of first impression for them. Normally, again, the waivers that are connected to the CBRA voting process are the waiver that you already obtained, easily granted on the consent calendar. This is not a waiver that they are accustomed to seeing. So we've got a bit of a first impression trying to go from 5 to 7 in the midst of changing the manner in which you're electing your trustees. So the recommendation is to hold a public hearing and adopt the waiver.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And with that, we will go into a public hearing, as was the case with our first item. We'll go into the public hearing here and take public comment at that time, and then close out the public hearing and turn it to the dais. I declare the topic of adopting a resolution directing the superintendent to seek a waiver from the State Board of Education related to increasing board membership to 7, a public hearing, and it is now open for public comment. We do have speaker cards for this time, and I'd like to remind the public that comments are limited to 2 minutes, and the clock will count down the time. And if you have not yet submitted a speaker card but would like to comment on this agenda item, now would be a good time to visit our staff over at the end of the table. We will begin with Glenn Snyder, and then next up will be Scott Rafferty.
Hello again. Please seek the waiver.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we have Scott Rafferty, followed by Maria Grijalva.
I also have spoken to the state board personnel. I make it a practice not to quote them. However, if you look, there are 2 different issues here. If you look at the election issue, the waiver that you already have is categorical. It's not limited to going to trustee areas. It covers all of the transitions. The issue with the conflict in the way the terms are sequenced is something I've tried to get the legislature to address. It's, I know you don't want to recognize that you are in court, and as of today, you are going to stay in court for a while. It's something that can be handled very easily by stipulation. I don't see any particular harm in the waiver. It's really up to you, but we need to deal with the issue that Ms. Kincaid raised, which is we should be working to find an economical way to have an election. And it's not going to cost $2.1 million, as the superintendent at one point said. I have also spoken to the registrar, and it can be done economically. We had worked together sooner. It could have been done with the statewide recall. But in any event, there's no harm in the waiver. You did retrofit. You made the previous waiver retroactive over my objections, and I don't think I raised some issues with the state board. That means it expires in March. That's not a great thing. That created another problem with when we tried to give you an extension so that you could do this after the census. I'll address that later because it's not really germane, but in any event, we're on board with however you want to proceed on this. We'll like to be partners and make it happen.
Thank you. Next up, we have Maria Grijalva, and that is our final person who's indicated in-person comment. So if anybody would like to jump in, now would be the time. Ms. Grijalva, please proceed.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Thank you so much for passing the resolution to 7 members. I'd like to ditto and reiterate what Mr. Rafferty just said. I don't really know how to repeat what he said, but please, I can't tell you enough how important it is for you to, at this point, let's just settle things peacefully and go forward. Ms. Kincaid has a very good, solid suggestion. I think we've all gone through a lot. Most of you've gone through a lot of beatings, verbal beatings, and I think that everything could get settled very easily and peacefully if you just accept the terms and conditions of Mr. Rafferty. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak.
We have one final public commenter at this time, Timothy Slayton.
Good afternoon again. I'm going to voice my opinion for acceptance of the waiver. I think that a special election at this point would be pretty much just a waste of taxpayer dollars at this point, especially with election coming in 2022. It would be a kind of a gross negligence, I think, on the part, especially for the people pushing for it. So I think it's just a waste of time and money. So thank you.
Thank you. That was the final speaker card for visitor comments. I do not see any written comments submitted. I just want to confirm with staff. I'm getting a visual indication that that's the case. So there being no further comments, I declare the public hearing closed. At this time, we'll turn it to my colleagues for discussion and questions. Mr. Hernandez.
I believe the gentleman said it very clear. Seek the waiver.
Ms. Costa.
I agree.
Ms. Creason.
I'm complicated.
That's why we love you.
Yeah. So this is a heavy question. You know, as we're in a room talking about increased representation, this waiver literally takes a decision away from voters. I contemplated this. I mean, we're saying that we're going to make this decision as 5 people and not take this out to the constituency. That's a big deal. So I asked some questions. For me, it really is, there is no good situation. If we do, it's my understanding, and please correct me if I get any of this wrong. It's my understanding if we do take this to the voters, then that creates the potential, almost for sure potential, that we would be appointing new governing board members. So then the question really becomes, okay, what's more important? Taking the question of 5 to 7 to voters, or allowing voters to elect their own representation? I would love for it to be both, but under this situation, as it's been explained to me by counsel, that just can't happen. So I just had to make a decision of, okay, well, what's the best scenario? And for me, the best scenario would be for the electorate to vote in the members that they want and us not appointing. That's, to me, unacceptable. So just my rationale. Oh, nope, I have more. We get to respond to public comment, right? I am a little disturbed by the idea of we will continue to receive public beatings unless we settle. I'm here to do a job and I can sleep just fine at night. I would love to work with everyone, but that seemed like a threat and I don't appreciate it. My goal is to ensure that there is as much voice as possible in this process as possible. Like, do everything that I can, and especially the folks that aren't at the table all the time. There's so many people. So the idea that someone can bully us or to settle something, it's just ridiculous. So I just needed to comment on that.
Dr. McKibben. Dr. McKibben, you might be on mute.
Am I there now?
We can hear you now, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I thought the button got pushed. All right. I believe that we have a fiduciary responsibility to spend the money of this district as close to the kids as we possibly can, even though it may be hundreds of thousands of dollars for a special election as opposed to the $2 million. The fact remains is if we spend it on an election, we don't spend it on our children and our teachers and our schools. I say seek the waiver.
Thank you, Dr. McKibben. We'll circle back one more time to see if there's any additional comments or questions. Ms. Creason.
Sorry, I did have some thoughts about the special election because it came up again. I apologize. I think it's been said once, but can someone say it again? How much are we talking when we're talking about a special election? I know, you haven't done all the numbers, but a range.
I can't accurately state that. I think what we would need to do is really go to the registrar again and ask that question. So we would need to do that and then provide that information to the board in a BC. I don't want to misspeak publicly.
No, understood. I guess my concern with that 2020, the next election is next year. And I get it. We want to ensure representation as quickly as possible, but it's also our job, which has been said by my colleagues, to protect the money. And the fact is we are going to hit a recession sooner than later. We just implemented a golden handshake deal to, avoid layoffs once we hit those hard times. So the idea of spending all that money on a special election, it seems like it would create great harm to our overall bottom line, which we're planning to not be great in the next couple of years. And also it's important to note this whole process of, going by district, which of course I support, cost money, and we're going to spend more money with our wonderful demographer once census is out. So considering all the cost in that 2022 is next year, it makes sense. So I apologize, I forgot to mention that in the first round.
No apology necessary. Dr. McKibben, did you have anything additional?
I do not.
Thank you for confirming. I do have just one clarifying question directed to Mr. Smith or someone on the team that might want to answer. And that's just, I similarly kind of struggled with the question of taking away the question and a vote from the community. Like, that's a big decision to make. However, upon discussions and hearing that even if we did go to the voters and there's a number of scenarios that will make heads spin really, really quickly, but let's just entertain for one moment one possible scenario, which is that it goes to the voters and the voters vote down the expansion. What happens then? Mr. Smith or Mr. Spinelli, can you please walk us through that?
So if you chose not to seek the waiver, then it would go to an election. And again, the dates of those elections are established by the elections code. So that election would be, I think it could be timely held for April of 2022. So if the voters said, no, we want you to remain a 5-person board, not a 7-person board, then you are right back to square one. 5-person board, and you have at-large voting, and you're starting this process you've now spent 2 years in all over again.
And I'm pretty sure I heard it, but just to put a real fine point on it, can you also just say what the legal risk at that point is? Are we, I mean, in terms of CVRA and us not being in compliance with CVRA?
You would be facing the same lawsuit that you're looking at now. So you would be out of compliance because you're still voting at large. Also, if you didn't seek the waiver of the process, even if the voters approved it. So let's do the other scenario. You go to the election and the voters say, yes, we like the idea of increased representation. We want you to go from 5 to 7. You never got the waiver. So now you're in the spring of 2022 and you're under that education code that I was just describing where you have to make that appointment process. So then you would be appointing someone to 2023, right, which is in between election cycles. So that particular appointment would then expire. It would create a vacancy. You would then make a provisional appointment that would last until the November election of 2024. The second trustee, remember, goes to the second odd numbered year. So that person's appointment, you're actually now under that scenario doing, I'll call it the undemocratic, because you're making an appointment that's going to run from the spring of 2022 all the way until December of 2025, at which time that appointment would cease. By operation of law, it would create a vacancy, and then you would be making a second appointment that would run until 2026. So if you don't seek the waiver, in many ways it becomes difficult with multiple provisional appointments, and it takes power away from the electorate.
Thank you. Difficult indeed. And I would also just add that it's my belief that any kind of special election just will not have the same participation as a general election or even a primary election, which would have less so participation. And so with the waiver, we get to stay with the kind of calendar of elections and ensure the most and full participation. But I appreciate the in-depth, detailed discussion. Is there a motion at this time to adopt resolution number 3063, directing the superintendent to seek a waiver from the State Board of Education related to increasing board members to 7?
So
Board membership
moved.
to 7. It's been moved by Ms. Costa and seconded by Dr. McKibben. We will do a roll call vote. Mr. Hernandez, Ms. Costa, Ms. Creason, Dr. McKibben.
Aye.
And I vote aye. That was unanimous. We are now at item F4, the California Voting Rights Act, public hearing and selection of preferred trustee area map. Mr. Smith.
So you are at item F4, so now public hearing and decision time. So we're at step 3 of our roadmap. So far, you've made some serious decisions. You made the decision to go from 5 to 7, and you've made the decision to seek the waiver. This is at the point of the meeting, I think you probably spent most of your time. What map are you going to look at? Now, remember, we had 9 alternative maps. By making the decision to go to the 7-member board, 4 go by the wayside because those dealt with 5 trustee areas. So you now have the 4 original maps that the demographer created with 7 trustee areas plus the alternative map. So it is now time to hold a public hearing and have a discussion about your preferred map using the 7 trustee area scenario.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. As was the case with our previous agenda items that indicated there was a public hearing, I will now open the public hearing, which will be the time for public comment. I will then close the public hearing and return it to the dais for discussion and questions. I declare the topic of selecting a preferred trustee area map and election sequencing schedule a public hearing, and it is now open for public comment. We do have speaker cards for this item, and I'd like to remind the public that comments are limited to 2 minutes, and the clock on the wall will count down the time. We have first up Glenn Snyder, followed by Scott Rafferty.
Hello again. So I applaud you for moving towards a 7-member board. And while the maps aren't necessarily exactly what I'd like to see, I understand that we're under a crunch timeline, and the map that I like the best, that I've looked at it with my family, friends, we all feel that scenario 3 is the best map out of that group. So please support scenario 3.
Thank you. Next up, we have Scott Rafferty, followed by Maria Grijalva.
Okay. This is an absurd situation, an absurd result. I am quoting your attorney, Michael Smith. This is what he told the governor of the state of California. Deciding this 20 days before the census is an absurd result, and it is a responsibility of his law firm, not us. You made the lawsuit happen in September of last year when you refused our request to put this off until after the census. And the terms that we were presented with were, we won't guarantee anything. We won't guarantee 2022, 2024. We won't guarantee 5 or 7 or anything. This is on the superintendent. This is what your minority district looks like. You can pay $3.5 million to be in the remedial district. That's how you have drawn these maps. Your demographer says there's no Section 2 liability. Under the standard that they set, a majority coalition district does exist in 2010 data. You're making this very bad no matter what you do tonight. You need to come to terms with the fact that you are in court, and you need to deal with us as partners, not adversaries, so we can get this done in a cost-effective way. This map will not stand. None of these maps will stand. They all mix millionaires with refugees and working class people and Latinos. It's a travesty. It is a creation of Michael Smith. He said to the governor, and he was right, it is an absurd situation, and it is his responsibility. Thank you.
Next up, we have Maria Grijalva, followed by Michelle Wright.
Well, thank you for this opportunity to speak. I would like to reiterate what Mr. Rafferty has said all of the maps that have been presented have been manipulated. Somehow the data has been misrepresented in one way or another. And you're not allowed to mix millionaires with poor folks like that. And so it would be so nice if you would settle this lawsuit. Seema, please don't feel like you're being bullied. It's not. Don't dig your heels because it's a lawsuit. If you're wrong, you're wrong. That's it. And you settle. Okay? That's it. And you're not being bullied. It's if you did something bad, you pay. And that's it. It's that simple. And you have to draw legal maps. You can't draw and gerrymander your way and put a millionaire house. I mean, have you seen these maps? Have you seen these houses that are together? And so, you know, it's manipulative. It's gerrymandering at its worst. And so please do what's right for the minority voters. This is what this is all about. Please speak to your heart, to your conscience. I know power it talks to you, but this is not about that. This is about the minority voters and the community interest. I think it's being phrased as communities of interest. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Next up, we have Michelle Wright, followed by Michael Seaman.
Hello again. Ms. Creason, you mentioned earlier that communities of interest, I think you said it was required that those are observed in the creation of the maps, but in looking at the exhibit, the word is may. So I'm still kind of concerned that that wasn't really, it was not required, frankly. And so, yeah, I guess the maps just are not where they should be. And so a couple things in terms of maybe the best map of the lot, the original trustee area map 474. But if it's possible with the following changes, including North Highlands and trustee area 1, without cutting any portions of West Arden Arcade out, which is what happened in the new maps. And so addressing to what you said about regarding dilution of like low income votes and the alternative perspective on, you know, diversifying or trustee areas. We know that, and we've seen this in the at-large elections and in terms of the representation that we've seen in the past here, that if you put wealthy folks with low-income folks, the wealthy folks are going to get elected. They have access to capital. That's how our elections work, frankly. And you know, we have a great example of that occurring here. So I would just advocate for really respecting socioeconomic status when you draw these or when you select the map that you do choose, so that we do ensure that folks that are members of communities that haven't been historically represented in the past do have that access, because I think the primary reason they have not is due to their lack of access due to lack of capital.
Next up, we have Michael Seaman, followed by Timothy Slate.
Thank you, board members. Please don't adopt a map tonight. Look, I think you've been running a really interesting and really decent process of reaching out to the public and asking for their opinion and presenting ideas and concepts and getting feedback. I think you've really been open about that. And I appreciate that a lot. But you also got some input tonight on your maps. I personally don't like any of them. And I've given you some input on what I do like. And I'd like to see the demographer have a chance to process that information further. I agree that the census data is just around the corner, the actual new census data, and that's important too. So if you're having trouble with your lawsuit, what I think you can tell the judge in all honesty is we've been acting in good faith. And we're doing the best we can. And the public has come to us and said, I mean, you can cite me if you want. The public has come and said, please don't adopt the map just yet. Wait a couple, 3 weeks. And I think if you do that, you're going to be on very solid ground. So thank you very much.
Next up, we have Timothy Slate, followed by Fred Latu.
Good evening again. I'd like to voice my opinion for adoption of map 7-3. I think that best represents the area that I live in personally. I'd also like to comment on the fact that, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you wait for the census data, you wouldn't have time to, you'd still be under the constraints of the lawsuit, correct? Or do
We
have
can't
time to wait?
engage with public comment. I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry.
Please continue. It's okay.
I guess that's pretty much it. On the comment about people not being able to beat out more wealthy candidates, I would just like to point out that, you know, our Sacramento City Council member Eric Guerra did in fact just that. You know, he pounded the ground. He, you know, did a grassroots campaign. So it can be done. Thank you for your time.
I do want to just, while I'm here, correct myself. Your public comment is yours to make with your 2 minutes. We can afterwards take into account what public comment that was taken. We just can't do a back and forth during the 2 minutes. So next up, we have Fred Latu, followed by Shirley Hall.
Good evening again. 10-year resident of Citrus Heights. I have 3 kids in the district. None of these maps are perfect. I don't think we can make them perfect for everybody. But I'm here to voice my support for the one that closest resembles what I would like to see, and that's scenario 3. Thank you.
And our last individual who's indicated a desire to speak is Shirley Hall. So if you are here with us and would like to speak, please submit a public comment card at this time. Ms. Hall, please begin when you're ready.
Okay, I have a master's degree, and I looked at those maps. Now, unfortunately, I did not receive my card until about 4 days before the meeting, and I already had something going on when you had those previous meetings. So my concern is that I looked at those maps, and none of them made sense to me. And as I said, I'm someone who has a degree, and it was very confusing to me. And I guess what I'm concerned about, or maybe I'm questioning, is why does that have to be settled tonight? Can someone tell me that again, why the map has to be settled tonight? Because this is where you need the input from that whole west end of the district, from those parents that go to Howe Avenue and Greer and Dyer Kelly. That's where you've got to get, I mean, if you went to Dyer Kelly and had a meeting back earlier in the month, and you only had 65 people show up, I'm sorry, there's a whole lot more people that you didn't hear from. And I guess that's my concern, is why the rush on the map? If someone can explain that to me, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. Seeing no further speaker cards at this time, I want to go over to written comments that have been submitted. Mr. Thigman, do we have written comments? Okay, I invite you to read them aloud at this time. Thank you.
We do, thank you. We have 2 written comments for item F4. The first is from Jenny Bruins, who writes, I hoped to make the meeting on July 27th, but I cannot get there. I request these comments be read into the record. If the trustees vote to split into 5 districts, I support scenario 5-4. If the trustees vote to split into 7 districts, I support scenario 7-5. Each of these choices does the best job in maintaining community continuity in Citrus Heights and the other communities within the district, a major goal of the districting process. Second comment is from Pamela Williams, who writes, proposed map 7-4 best meets the children in my neighborhood in Arden Arcade. That concludes our written comments.
Thank you. There being no further public comments at this time, I declare the public hearing closed. As has been the case with our prior items, I will do one round of comments and then kind of one last sweep, and we'll go in order. We'll begin with Mr. Hernandez.
I appreciate, again, the comments. I just want a couple of clarifications because there's been some questions, I think, after some discussion. To our demographer, we've heard that Citrus Heights should be, have their own representation as a whole as the city of Citrus Heights. I asked you this in a board meeting. Could you explain why what that would cause for the entire district of Citrus Heights as the city would have one representation?
Well, to comply with the one person, one vote, Federal Voting Rights Act, it's impossible. Based on 7 members, the average, when we break the district's total population up, it's just about 46,000. And the city of Citrus Heights is closer to 90,000.
Perfect. I appreciate that. I just wanted to clarify that. And gosh, and you know what, I'm going to find my question out when we come back through. And one more next question and clarify, Mr. Spinelli, again, for clarification, can you explain very briefly why we cannot wait and we need to process as we are and as we're doing?
Well, I don't want to repeat myself, but it's the same answer that I gave earlier, and that is the time frame, depending how it's calculated, is either 41 days or 80 days. We could not get agreement on 80 days, so you're proceeding on 41 days. That requires you to make the decision tonight so it can go to the county committee for approval on August 5th.
Thank you.
Ms. Costa.
I'd like to reiterate my thanks to everyone who's made comments and sent comments, attended meetings, and reached out to share your thinking. This has been a very thorough and deliberate process because it will shape our district for years to come. I have spent more than 20 hours studying the maps. I created an overlay of the high school student distribution for each high school over each of the maps. I studied the population information. Using the federal guidelines, I looked at which maps were compact and contiguous and respected the communities of interest. Like every community member that I've spoken with, I could make changes that I liked, but what I learned in the previous meetings is that a change here or there directly affects population numbers in another area. I also studied sequencing for each of the maps. I reviewed notes from the community and board meetings and read comments about which maps people preferred. What I saw was, just as I had things that I liked and didn't like, there weren't clear-cut choices across the board for our community members. All of that led me to the decision that one map creates the most compact areas, utilizes the major streets well, most closely matches where the majority of high school students reside and attend high school, and respects communities of interest. I think the sequencing for this map also makes sense. And so I will happily listen to what my fellow board members are thinking, because I really care what the thinking is on the dais, and then I'll go from there. Thank you.
Ms. Creason.
So I'm going to cover some of the points that I've been holding off that I just want to address. There has been a lot of concern of what the districts mean. Now that we're going to districts, does this change where my kid can go to school? The answer is no. This is nothing but voting. And I just wanted that stated for the record, because that's a very, very real concern. It's like, okay, well, does that create new school boundaries? What does that mean for me and my child? So I just want folks to be crystal clear on this, and we probably need to communicate that out, so people really understand what that means. This will not impact that. There's also tremendous concern about, we go by district, your trustees, are part of a smaller area of the district, and we'll have tunnel vision and not necessarily consider the rest of the district. So I want to address that. We're an open enrollment district. This is something I've said in a couple of board meetings. We're open enrollment. So many students that will live in our individual districts will go to schools outside of our districts. So by design, we're going to have to think very globally, which I think is a good thing. That doesn't mean don't be responsive to your district. That's not what I'm saying. But for those that are concerned that we're not going to be able to see it as a whole, that certain things won't happen because, you know, it's a fight over, oh, well, I need this, and, you know, just a fight up here. I think that we're going to get past that. And also there's been comments, you know, throughout this process that we as a board want to commit to setting a precedent that that is how we're going to do business. So I just wanted to address that. It's been said a few times, so I'm just going to go ahead and say it. It has been said during public comment, you are in court, treat us like partners. In my experience, that's not how that works. You know, once there's a lawsuit, you have to deal with the lawsuit. So the idea that we're partners now, just my position is, no, we're not. You know, a lawsuit stopped that. And it's unfortunate because I think we could have done this way better. I share the concern about low-income communities mixed in with communities with a lot more privilege. And that's absolutely the case with Sierra Oaks. It is. They have concerns too. It's concerning. You know, in our community, I spent a lot of time just kind of I spent a lot of time running around these parts, you know, for a while. And when I think about our community, it's very interesting. You know, you can be 2 blocks in, you know, poverty and then move up 2 blocks and then there's $1 million house. It's absolutely true. The mix is, it's there, and I have concerns as well. I don't know that we're going to be able to get to perfect. Again, I wish we had more time. And, you know, I want to circle back. So I appreciated Mr. Hernandez's question about, well, what if, you know, why are we doing it so fast? But if I can ask a follow-up, could you explain what happens if we don't do this in 41 days? I think I know you've said this earlier, but I would like it repeated, please.
Tomorrow, there was supposed to be a hearing in court on our motion to dismiss the California Voting Rights Act cause of action in this lawsuit. The court's tentative ruling today continued that hearing to August 10th. There has been no decision. We'll have a decision on or about August 10th. The reason that motion was made is because the lawsuit, while you are in the safe harbor provision under the law, is not allowed to be filed, should not be filed under the California Voting Rights Act case. So there was a motion to dismiss that cause of action. The remaining days of 41 on the shortest time frame, if that is the time frame that is correct, and since we could not get agreement on 80, you are proceeding according to that. If we go outside of the safe harbor provision and the lawsuit remains, it is not dismissed, then you are exposed to a greater financial exposure to attorney's fees from the other side of the case. So if it is done within the safe harbor, the idea of the safe harbor is really an administrative remedy between someone demanding of voting by district area trustees and the entity complying within a certain amount of time. It's this time to get it done, and no one is punished, but the law does provide for compensation for the people that initiated that process. That compensation is dictated in the statute of a certain amount, which I mentioned earlier, a little bit over $30,000. If the entity does not comply and is out of the safe harbor or a variety of other things, then they expose themselves to the continued litigation and potentially all other attorney's fees or litigation being filed, and those attorney's fees if the entity did not, as an example, pursue trustee area-based elections. So that might be a little bit more than you asked for.
No, I think it's helpful. Thank you. Appreciate it. So thank you for addressing this. I'm going to be jumping all over the place. Sorry. There was a good question about the amount of concerns about the amount of input that we received, and I thought that was a really good. It was good. It's a flag. It was a flag for me when we think about how many constituents we have, how many students we have, how many staff. I mean, it does seem like really small numbers. And when I asked about that, Superintendent Kern, can you share discussions about that?
Yeah, it actually might be better if we had Mr. Smith come up and in your experience of working with other districts and the amount of community engagement that you have seen in other districts, how has what we've seen in terms of those individuals that came out as well as public comment that we've had at our board compare with other situations in other districts?
The public input process varies tremendously from district to district. So it's really hard to put a number to it to say how does it compare. The public hearing process that you engaged in, where you went to multiple sites, multiple languages, did all of that, is not statutorily required. It's certainly encouraged. So that was a good thing to do in and of itself. Frankly, I was impressed. I've worked with a number of districts where they've done those kinds of community meetings and hearings and have had very, very few people attend. So I was impressed by the amount of participation you had. And I don't know, Justin, maybe you could comment on that, just from what's your experience with that?
I would echo that. I think in our experience, there's times where we hold community input meetings and go through the maps and all those things. I'm thinking of a district down in Southern California that covers a very large area, similar situation where there's diverse constituencies, and we'd have meetings where 2 or 3 people showed up, other meetings where, a few more, but I think just on the whole, this is a lot more, I won't say a lot more. This is on the higher end of public input and interaction than what we typically see.
I appreciate that because I didn't want to repeat it wrong. And it's still a small number when you think about how large our constituency is and how many, it's still a small number. So I'm not trying to make any excuses for that, but it did make me take pause when I heard it's a lot less other places. So I think that we need to continue our work in engagement and outreach, need more ideas, need to do more in that part. So I don't want to minimize that comment, but I really wanted to acknowledge that comment because it was a question that I had too. It did make me feel better that maybe we're doing a little better than others, but we could still do more. There was a public comment asking that pointed out that the word may was used in the criteria that we laid out. So could maybe, share what was used to be really clear what was considered?
Yeah, I think that when we're talking about communities of interest, that is a term that represents social and economic shared characteristics, and that's difficult to quantify. And I think the reason why may be in there is because there are other hard and fast criteria that you must comply with. One person, one vote, Section 2 of the Federal Voting Rights Act. So I think it was in there to indicate the difficulty in being able to accomplish all of those things in addition to the things that you must. So I think that's why it was described that way.
Did we consider everything that was on? I'm losing my words. On the criteria sheet.
Yeah.
Did we consider that in this process, or did you when you drew the maps?
Yeah, and I think that our maps reflect that. Certain things will be prioritized in a given map over another. For instance, one of the things that we heard was that there should be at least one high school in each of the boundaries, and so that's something that we drew the boundaries. According to that, we tried to use geographic landmarks or natural dividing lines like major streets and things like that. City boundaries and community boundaries. So you'll see different iterations of that. And because when you're moving to 7 trustee areas and the pure numbers of what those communities are, that's not going to get it perfectly, but as best as possible. And I think trying to account for what makes most sense, for if you have multiple communities within one given district, that there's some geographic connection to them. And so, yes, I think we've done as best as we can to meet all of those different criteria. In each scenario, one might be prioritized over another. And that's why you'll see things like the minority groups in one boundary may, when you go scenario to scenario, those numbers fluctuate because naturally you're bringing in more or less.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you, Ms. Creason. Next up, we will turn to Dr. McKibben.
Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Oh, good. I want to thank Mr. Fairclough and the folks that did these things. They did an amazing job, even though I found it very frustrating listening to Ms. Costa a little bit earlier about the amount of time that I'm sitting here on the floor of a hotel room, having brought a few pounds of paper down with me as I went on this year-and-a-half postponed vacation. But I would like to say that because of looking at issues such as communities of interest, and I'll talk a little bit about this, and knowing that there is no such thing as a perfect map, I believe that map scenario 4 of the 7 trustees areas best suits the kinds of interests that we have been talking about. For example, as I mentioned, that I've lived in on the east side of the district for nearly 40 years, and so I think there are interests there. It's also important to understand that throughout this district, there are areas of significant poverty. For example, in the Orangeville Fair Oaks area, that on a weekly basis, there are many people, including myself, that work with the food insecure people that live there, literally thousands of people. And so that becomes a community of interest in that economic way. And I think that community ought to be kept together. That's why seeing this map that keeps Casa Roble and Bella Vista together in the Fair Oaks, Orangeville area, I think is a very important thing to do. As I look to the east side of this map, I think that the notion of having an area for Arden Arcade west of Watt and as a distinct area, and as an area that frankly would require somebody new to be voted to the board, I think is a very important thing, and this map includes that. If you take a look at Citrus Heights and listen to Citrus Heights and their 91,000 people, they indeed did think that they should have the better part of 2 representatives on a 7-member board. If you look at the map there, I think that pretty much accomplishes that. I look at the central core of this map, and I think that though it is a little bit elongated, it makes sense to me that those communities of interest are combined together, and with having Del Campo High School as the anchor to that map. In map 7-4, there would be 3 open trustee seats, and as I mentioned, 2 in Citrus Heights and 1 in Arcade, and I also think that it's important that there's only one district where there are competing trustees, though that's a relatively minor thing, and in fact was not included in our criteria. I think it's worth considering. So all in all, as I look at the choices within the seven trustees area, I find that the most satisfying although all are a bit frustrating, is map 7-4. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. McKibben. I do want to circle back one more time to my colleagues for any additional questions or comments at this time. Mr. Hernandez.
I didn't purposely did not mention which map I supported, but for many reasons that I agree with everyone, my colleagues, and for all the circumstances that, and there's many, but it boils down to this. As I mentioned, I took to account exactly, to me, my impression of what the community wanted. And like I said, I felt that they wanted 7. And in my heart of hearts, I feel that 7.3 is best represented by the interests of our community at large. So therefore, I support 7.3.
Ms. Costa, anything additional?
I also support 7.3 for the reasons that I stated earlier. 7.3 is, I feel, has the most compact areas, utilizes the major streets well, most closely matches where the majority of high school students reside and attend, and respects communities of interest. I also think the sequencing for 7.3 works well.
Ms. Creason.
It was a hard decision. It was so incredibly hard. And I want to just share some things that I kept in mind. Number one was community input every step of the way. I can't tell you how many times I looked at the jam boards and reread, what came on and came through the form, and emails and phone calls, and really reaching out to people that weren't being engaged. Keeping in mind, keeping communities together, recognizing we have a lot of different communities in our very large district. I did consider income inequities, although, I don't know how we get that perfect, but I did definitely consider it. Heard loud and clear, do not split Art and Arcade north and south, split east and west, which makes a lot of sense. I also want to just acknowledge, I really did hear and understood the idea that absorbing some of North Highlands makes sense because of similar socioeconomic statuses, which I totally agree. I used to run in those neighborhoods and made sense. I think we saw some of that tried in one of the alternative map scenarios. It created other problems. So, and I also hear, don't split up Citrus Heights more than necessary. So again, I wish we had more time because this is such a major, major, major decision. I really do. This is us doing this fast isn't what I want to do. I just want to reiterate that. But with all that said and all that considered, I think 7.3 best represents our district.
Dr. McKibben. Dr.
I stand on what I said. I think that I will say that frankly I don't think that 7.3 serves the whole district the way that 7.4 does. Okay, that's enough.
Thank you, Dr. McKibben. I don't typically make it a point to respond quite as directly to public comment. I usually like to absorb all of the public comment and take it into full account. But I was asked to speak from my heart. And so there's been one thing that's been weighing on me, and I'm going to do that. And that's to say that as a survivor of abuse, I find it disgusting that an individual would say, do this and it will stop the beating, when they are the ones doing the beating. Just do as I say, and I won't hurt you anymore. I've heard those words before, and I've survived that behavior, and I am not and will not be your victim. I also encourage you to look up the word manipulate, because I don't think you know the meaning of it. I want to thank the public for their participation in this process. Those that took time out of their day to email us, call me, or one of my colleagues, or attend a public meeting. I know we've heard input from many. This is our largest governance change since San Juan Unified School District became a unified district, and I believe the input from many contributed to improving this process. I could never have imagined we'd be navigating this critical question of representation in the midst of a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. And while it has been acknowledged multiple times this evening, this was not the best timeline for anyone. We worked with what we had. And thankfully, what we have is extremely dedicated staff who, after a difficult 18 months, came together to facilitate this process. Thank you. Thank you as well to my colleagues. Discussions and decisions as large as the ones we've made today can fracture a board and a governance team. However, we stayed focused on the desired outcome and what we were all elected to do. Look out for what is best for our children and our communities. And I'm grateful that we were able to do so in a respectful and thoughtful manner. With regards to the map, there is no right map here. The feedback from our outreach and community meetings indicate that preferences of community members was all over the place. Some members of our community preferred maps with 5 board members, others for 7. Some wanted 1 seat for Citrus Heights and 1 for Arden Arcade and North Highlands, both within a 7-member map configuration. These priorities are directly in conflict with each other, as the maps that best reflect those would be a 5-member map. And I received feedback that our new map, 7-5, was still not perfect or ideal, which I concede, and would benefit from significant revisions. In an ideal world, we'd have more time. But in the end, our jobs as the currently elected board is to listen and then make the call, to decide as we see fit. As has been the case throughout the last 18 months, there are no good choices, just good decisions. Ultimately, the strongest variable for me, after taking everything into consideration in totality, was consideration of where our students live and where they go to school. Map 7-3 is the map that best consolidates where our Encina students and families actually live, and is the map that gives them the strongest voice. In addition to best representing that school community, the same can be said for the distribution of most of our other comprehensive high schools. Again, I want to emphasize that I'm not suggesting it's a perfect map. I recognize that that is not the case for our San Juan High students, and I think it's important for me to recognize and acknowledge that. Additionally, it does not contain our City of Citrus Heights partners in 1 seat, which I heard is a desire, but does not meet our legal requirements of proportional distribution of population. After a lot of thought and consideration, I believe that map 7-3 is the map that will best serve our children, our families, and our neighborhoods. And with that, and seeing no further comments or questions, I'd like to make a motion to select the map entitled 7 Trustee Areas, Conceptual Scenario 3, as the preferred trustee area map. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved by myself and seconded by Mr. Hernandez. We will do a roll call vote. Mr. Hernandez.
Aye.
Ms. Costa. Ms. Creason. Dr. McKibben.
No.
And I vote aye. That was 4 ayes and 1 no. The motion carries. We are now at item F5, California Voting Rights Act, Selection of Preferred Election Sequencing Schedule. Mr. Smith.
Okay, we are at step 4 of the roadmap. You are making progress. I recognize that was a difficult decision. What I thought we would do at this stage of the board meeting is to talk about a couple of general criteria that apply to the sequencing question, and then some criteria that apply to a 7-person board, and then let's look at scenario 3 using the 7-person map. So a couple of general considerations that govern the sequencing process. The first principle is the one that is contained in the first bullet, and that is the right of board members to fulfill the terms. So you have a right, if you are if your term expires in 2024, to remain on the board, even if that seat comes up for election in 2022. Now, the second principle comes from an education code that we wouldn't necessarily be familiar with. And that education code says that if you have multiple vacant trustee areas, then it's the county committee, not the school board, that determines the sequencing. Okay? Now, you just made a decision to go from a 5-person board to a 7-person board. By definition, every map you're going to look at is going to have at least 2 trustee areas that are vacant. So this principle of section 5021 is going to be at play in our election sequencing discussion. Whoops, went too far. So for a 7-member board, remember that you have 2 seats that are going to be up on the natural for election in 2022 and 3 in 2024. All right, so then to ensure implementation of the 7-person board, we need to have 4 trustees up for election in 2022. I spoke to this earlier, and 3 in 2024. So that's the key criteria. So with the 7-person board, 4 in 2022, 3 in 2024. Now, we didn't know, of course, which way the board was going to go, so I had to create scenarios. So now let's go to the map that you selected, which is the 7-person board conceptual scenario number 3. So let me walk you through the grid. I thought this might be helpful for the board to look at. So the areas that are identified in blue, you'll see trustee areas 1, 6, and 7 have the blue shading. That's indicating that those trustee areas in this map would be vacant. All right. Then remember the principle we just described out of the education code. If you have multiple vacant trustee areas, it goes to the county committee to determine by lot, as they will decide during that August 5th board meeting, 2 of those trustee areas for election in 2022. So when you look at the option, and it's interesting because every other map had 2 or 3 options that were laid out for election sequencing, and possibly even more. Those were just the most logical options. But this map, there's really only one logical sequencing option. So if you look at trustee area, the option A is for trustee areas 3 and 5 to be elected in 2022, and then the 2 vacant areas. So it would be 2 of trustee areas 1, 6, or 7. Everybody with me? All right. So if you look at these trustee areas, what that's trying to do is to sort of flow with on the natural sequencing cycle. So by picking area 3 for 2022, that trustee is already standing for election in that year. And by going to trustee area 5, that trustee is up for election in 2022. And then you would have 2 of the vacant areas in 2022. All right. So the reason that alternate scenarios don't work is maybe if you flip that and think about it. So for example, put areas 4 and 5 up in 2022 and see what happens. So now if you put trustee area 4, where there's currently an incumbent that goes to 2024, then that trustee area would be up in 2022. So that trustee would have a choice to make, either stay on the board for 2 years and go off, or run for a new 4-year seat in 2024. All right. And then in area 5, if it was trustee area 2, then you've got the same thing. But what winds up happening is if you select areas 2 and 4 for election in 2022, you could already have 2 people up in 2022, and now you'd be having a third. So the reason these scenarios don't work is you wind up with multiple trustees in areas 2 and 4 and no representation in areas 3 and 5 until 2024. So it's a very odd election sequencing. So the natural, I guess, the natural election sequencing is the option A that's indicated on this map.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We do have public speaker cards for this item, so I'm going to turn it to public comment and then turn it to the dais for any questions or comments. At this time, we have 2 individuals who have requested an opportunity to speak. If there are any additional individuals that would like to speak on this item, now would be the time to indicate that interest by filling out a speaker card. First, we have Scott Rafferty, followed by Maria Grijalva.
Please don't do this to the county committee. I realize that Mr. Smith and his law firm are at war with Latino voting rights. They fought in West Contra Costa, and they cost that community $380,000, and they lost on every single point. And their client conceded probable violation of Section 2, just like you will. But the California Voting Rights Act in Section 10010B says that this is over with. All these lotteries that you're talking about, he pitched this to the Contra Costa County Committee, along with a lot of personal attack, his partner, Mr. Freeman. They threw it out. Then the court threw it out. Comply with the California Voting Rights Act. You must sequence this in accordance with the purposes of the California Voting Rights Act, not by lottery. That is unambiguously clear. We've tried to act as partners, and don't tell me that people can march into a court of law and betray their oath to tell the truth and make only good faith arguments. We should be partners. As members of the bar, we have an obligation. We have an obligation not to mislead the governor of the state of California in the middle of a pandemic by saying that the registrar will not complete timely submitted maps due to the pandemic. Don't do this again. The sequencing is determined by law, not by lot, not by your whim. Comply with the law.
Next up, we have Maria Grijalva, and that's the end of our list of individuals. So again, if you have something to add, now would be the time to do a speaker comment card. Ms. Grijalva.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I believe Mr. Rafferty asked for a county committee, and if that's what he said, I like to ask you to please comply with that, or to comply with his request. I do want you to know that attorneys are very manipulative, and with regard to your comment, thank you so much for speaking from your heart. It's sad that we live in a patriarchal society where femicide is very frequent. I happen to be a survivor myself. So thank you for speaking from your heart. I but it takes it takes a relationship to be manipulative, and we're not in a relationship. I will come here and bash you over and over because you're a public official, and that's my obligation, is to put you in line, because your self-interest is overriding the public interest. And what Scott Rafferty's been asking you to do over and over and over is to look for the Latino interest and to look for community interest. And that's not what's happening. What these gentlemen are doing is not in community interest. What these gentlemen are doing is looking in their interest. And if you look at their color, forgive me for doing that, if you look at their color, they're not of color. Okay, so your interest is your kind. Your interest is not my kind. And so your values are not the same as my values. And so please listen to Mr. Rafferty. Thank you so much.
I see no further no further speaker cards at this time. Do we have any written comments submitted for this item?
We actually have one more public
okay,
comment.
Sure.
Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Mike Nishimura, and given the circumstances, it seems that Area 3 and Area 5 are up for sure. I would suggest that two of the areas that you pick would be 1 and 7, since those are the two areas that are hurting most for representation right away. and then hold off until 2024 for Area 6. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. I want to confirm that there's no additional written comment on this item at this time. Staff is indicating no.
We do have one written
Oh.
comment.
Okay,
Apologies.
none necessary. Please go ahead when you're ready.
We have one comment for F5. This is from Padre Organized Community. Good evening. This past weekend, our community gathered to attend the SCOE board retreat, and at that meeting, we had the opportunity to discuss the redistricting of San Juan Unified. What we heard was that a 7-member board was the best fit for San Juan Unified. We also were not amused or impressed with how the marginalized communities many claim to be advocating for were still spoken of in manners that promoted stigma. We also noticed that those, quote, allies, unquote, claimed support from some of the most self-serving, quote, Latino, unquote, organizations and individuals who do not actually live or serve the district area. In fact, many of those organizations and individuals are located in areas that send many students to San Juan through open enrollment. It is understandable now why many community leaders were against this change in marginalized communities. We heard many people ask for Citrus Heights to have exclusive representation while leaving the most marginalized and vulnerable communities to represent and advocate for themselves. This is the very opposite of inclusion and equity. We would like to see the district split areas into formations that would best support students and stakeholders of all backgrounds. We are demanding that this board evaluate how the new representation has impacted student success and community involvement. We want a commitment to ensure that San Juan continues to provide the programs and supports that make it a destination district. Thank you.
There being no further in-person or written comment at this time, we will now move it to the dais for board member questions or comments. We'll begin with Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you. One of the reasons why I liked 7.3 was the sequencing that existed. It made the most sense to me. And I do like the fact that the county takes the decision away from us and they pick by lots. And so, I mean, ideally, I would love to see Area 1, they have a good chance, 2 out of 3, they get a good chance of having a representation in the election in 24. So I support scenario 3.
Ms. Costa.
I've already said that the sequencing for Area 3 was one of the things that I had considered, so I support it.
Ms. Creason.
I agree with the prioritization that's laid out in option A of scenario 3. It makes a lot of sense because I agree. Art and Arcade and Citrus Heights need to be first on the list for sure. But, I think that we're going to need to, I know right now is not the time, but we're going to need to come up with a plan as a board to ensure that the lonely, what district is that? 6? Or whatever ends up being the district that doesn't have representation, that all of us as a board are ensuring, which I know we will do, ensure that they are supported and don't feel like they're being left out because they're all ours, which I know we all agree on, but I just wanted to state it for the record to make sure that we figure out what we're going to do so that we support the whole community.
Dr. McKibben.
I support, and I'm looking at the maps, the colored maps. I support option B on my list, which has 1, 3, 5, and 6 in 2022 and 2024, 2, 4, and 7. That's the one I support.
And I appreciate the discussion that's taken place. I don't have anything further to add at this time that my colleagues haven't already mentioned. So at this time, I would like to make a motion to select option A for 7 trustee areas, conceptual scenario 3. It's been moved by myself and seconded by Ms. Creason. I will do a roll call vote. Mr. Hernandez. Ms. Costa. Ms. Creason, Dr. McKibben,
No.
and I vote aye. That was 4 ayes and 1 no. That motion carries. We are now at item F6, California Voting Rights Act, adoption of a resolution initiating a proposal to the Sacramento County Committee on School District Organizations. Mr. Smith.
Okay, we are nearing the end of what I know has been a long board meeting. So having selected a map and a sequencing schedule, the next agenda item is essentially to put that in a package so that it constitutes a proposal to the county committee. You may recall that in the board packet, we had 2 alternative resolutions. One, if you decided to do 5-member board, one, if you decided to do a 7-member board. Both of those resolutions also had blanks in them for the selection of the map and the selection of the sequencing options. So at this point in time, maybe we could have the Simlic summarize what would be in that resolution just so that we all understand it. But essentially, it would be the 7-person resolution. And scenario number 3, then election sequencing A. All right, and so that's the resolution you would be voting on and then submitting to the county committee, and the county committee would then have a hearing on that on August 5th.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Joseph, I was wondering if you would be able to put the sequencing back up on the screen. There you go. Thank you. All right, so as the resolution will be read, paragraph 2 under the now therefore be it resolved will be trustee area conceptual scenario number 3. Paragraph 4A will be completely crossed out. Paragraph 4B will have conceptual scenario number 3 circled. And paragraph BI number 1, it will be trustee areas 3 and 5 will be scheduled for election in 2022, and trustee areas 2 and 4 will be scheduled for election in 2024, and the 3 vacant areas of 1, 6, and 7 will be scheduled for election by the county committee by lot. I believe those are the only changes.
Thank you, Ms. Simlic. Just to, for a very meticulous but important clarifying point, because we did have 2 resolutions in the packet. We had 3064 and 3065. I just want to confirm and have you confirm that this was in reference to resolution number 3065.
That is correct.
Thank you, ma'am. We do have public comment. We've got 1 public comment at this time. If any additional members would like to add public comment, now would be a good time to go indicate as such over in the corner. We have Scott Rafferty. Please begin when you're ready.
Since so much of this evening seems to involve attorney's fees, I wanted to make a couple observations. First of all, Ontario recently settled for $300,000. They made the determination that there was no good faith basis to assert the governor's order. Never before in history of our country has a governor purported to keep someone out of court, let alone a minority, a protected minority, asserting the most treasured value of all, the right to vote. This has never before happened. It will not be sustained by the California courts. So your arguments are kind of futile. Leaving that aside, what you've done here tonight, this argument that we have to comply by such and such a time, you've just violated section 10,010B. So that's also moot. For the record, I will also note in your choice of 7-3, Mr. Ferdshaw, who until this proceeding was trusted by the minority community. During the July 13th meeting, he said, don't do 7-4, do 7-3, because that's where we got the highest minority of 44%. However, Area 1 on scenario 1, 3, and 4 were identical. It was an attempt to mislead the public. So you've got a heck of a record that you built here. I beg to differ with your public outreach. It was abysmal. It was a rush to judgment, and never before in the history of the California Voting Rights Act has somebody tried to do this 20 days.
Thank you, Mr. Rafferty. We have no additional comment cards at this time, speaker cards. I want to check in with staff. Do we have any written comments submitted at this time? We do have one, Mr. Thigpen.
Thank you. This comment is submitted by Padre Organized Community. Good evening. We are very disappointed to learn that this district will be moving forward with a dysfunctional system, as can be seen in 2 local districts that contribute high numbers of open enrollment students to San Juan Unified. We are disappointed that the board was influenced by individuals and organizations that are, quote, Latino, unquote, in surname only, that do not live in district lines, but again, live in areas that contribute high numbers of open enrollment students to San Juan. We do have some hope, as we heard from SCOE board members this Saturday, and they felt 7-member representation was the best fit. We are demanding that this board evaluate how the representation, I need my glasses. We are demanding that this board evaluate how the new representation has impacted student success and community involvement. We want a commitment to ensure that San Juan continues to provide the programs and supports that make it a destination district. We also were not amused or impressed with how the marginalized communities many claimed to be advocating for were still spoken of in manners that promoted stigma. It is understandable now why many community leaders were against this change in marginalized communities. We heard many people ask for Citrus Heights to have exclusive representation while leaving the most marginalized and vulnerable communities to ensure adequate and equitable representation. This is the exact opposite of inclusion, and we are concerned it will only contribute to further marginalization. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I see no further public comment, neither written nor in person. Okay. I will turn it to my colleagues for any questions or comments. Mr. Hernandez, Ms. Costa, Ms. Creason, Dr. McKibben, Dr. McKibben.
No comment.
Okay, great.
No.
Is there a motion to adopt resolution number 3065, initiating a proposal to the Sacramento County Committee on School District Organization for the adoption of bi-trustee area elections and an increase in board membership from 5 to 7? It's been moved by Ms. Creason. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Ms. Costa. We will do a roll call vote. Mr. Hernandez, Ms. Costa, Ms. Creason, Dr. McKibben.
Aye.
And I vote aye. That was unanimous. We are now at item F7, tentative agreement, California School Employee Association. Mr. Thigpen.
Good evening, President Villescaz, board members, Superintendent Kern, and Ms. Cunningham. I'm here tonight to present the tentative agreement between the California School Employees Association and the San Juan Unified School District. This item will be brought back for action on August 10th. At this time, I can answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. I do not see that we have any speaker comments cards on this item, nor do we have any written comments submitted. Does any board members have questions or comments? I only have one comment. I believe you. Oh, Ms. Creason, did you have one? I saw the finger. Sorry.
I was waiting for a long time to put that candy in my mouth. I'm sorry. I believe, Mr. Thigpen, this is Thigpen. This is the first time you're addressing the board.
That's correct.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's an
That's
honor
it.
to be here.
It's great to see you. And I look forward to connecting with you.
Likewise, thank you. It's an honor to be here.
My comment was going to be to also welcome you. I mean, I think, no, that's okay. A couple weeks on the job and you're already getting some work done, although I know. I know that a lot of work has gone into this. We're very excited to have you, and thank you very much for the presentation. This item will return for action on August 10th.
Thank you, President Villescaz. I would not purport to have done the heaviest lift on this work. My predecessor and the teams at CSCA definitely put in a lot of equity into this great news tonight, but I'm happy to present the positive news. Thank you.
Glad you could be the messenger. We do not need to return to closed session at this time, and there being no further items on the agenda, we are adjourned.